weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum braucht er was zum Essen, bitte sehr. Es macht ihn ein Geschwätz nicht satt, das schafft kein Essen her.
Drum links, 2, 3, drum links, 2, 3, wo dein Platz genossen ist, weil dich ein in die Arbeit einmeinst und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum hat der Stiefel im Gesicht nicht gern. Er will unter sich keinen Sklaven sehen und über sich keinen Herrn.
Drum links, 2, 3, drum links, 2, 3, wo dein Platz genossen ist, weil dich ein in die Arbeiter einmeinst und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Prolet ein Prolet ist, drum wird ihn kein anderer befreien. Es kann die Befreiung der Arbeiter nur das Werk der Arbeiter sein.
Drum links, 2, 3, drum links, 2, 3, wo dein Platz genossen ist, weil dich ein in die Arbeiter einmeinst und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Здравствуйте, comrades. Welcome to Socialism Saturday, a very special episode of Socialism Saturday because it is the first episode of Socialism Saturday since I infiltrated the Socialism Conference and spent 3 days with the socialists themselves, and I even got a t-shirt that I'm wearing right now. This is my Haymarket Books t-shirts, one of my Haymarket Books t-shirts. I got 2 Haymarket Books t-shirts at the Socialism Conference. And so if anyone is new, I just want to say, like, if you are new to Socialism Saturday and maybe you've been enticed into watching Socialism Saturday as a result of my coverage of the Socialism Conference, please let us know we're here. And yes, we are going to be watching a video from the actual Socialism Conference today. So you're going to get to see the type of thing that I had to spend 3 days sitting through in Chicago last weekend. But of course, it was all worth it because we got lots of great tidbits. We got no matter what Jack Posobiec and any other fake journalists on the internet like to say, I got the president of the American Library Association on the record saying that the president of the American Library Association wants to make libraries a site of socialist organizing. We got that on tape. I got people on tape talking about how they are openly and flagrantly breaking the laws in Florida and teaching banned or fugitive subjects in the classroom. They call it fugitive pedagogy. You can read about that on the Substack. I got so much stuff on recording that maybe aren't going to be big news stories, but that are going to be interesting to us because we like socialism for reasons past even my own understanding. But there is still a lot more to come from the Socialism Conference, and you can, of course, follow along with my releases of the Socialism Conference over on my Substack, which is Carlin, Karlyn, .substack.com. Again, that is Carlin, Karlyn, .substack.com. You can read about the different releases that I've dropped so far, and there are plenty more to go. Trust me, I've been trying to slowly drip it out because I'm one person and there's only so much audio footage I can go through in any given day, and so it's just a lot. And listen, guys, it is, I'm actually like, I'm really thrilled with the response that I've had with people who are interested in socialism, people who are interested in learning about it. And the reason that I'm just really thrilled is, listen, The reason that we focus so much on socialism is these are the people who are driving the woke left agenda. These are the people who are driving the talking points of the Democratic Party. These are the people who have taken over the institutions. These are the people who are pushing woke nonsense onto all of us every single day, even though they don't seem to think they're winning, but we know they're winning because we watch them every single week and we watch the result of their labors, which I don't necessarily think they take the time to do. And so it is really important to pay attention to what the real socialists are doing, because we learned this a year ago when we started watching Socialism Saturday, that the very best way to know where the left is going is to listen to the socialists, because they are the ones that are driving the talking points for everything. And so everyone who watches Socialism Saturday, and I really do mean this, socialism can be a bit overwhelming, especially if you're new to socialism. It can be a bit overwhelming, but I promise you, if you stick with it, you will start to learn their language. You will start to learn what they're doing. You will start to learn the code that they speak in. You will learn how to identify socialists as they show up in the wild, which they do all the time. And once you learn how to speak their language, that is going to allow you to walk into an environment where these people are trying to advance their agenda and advance their ideology, and be able to identify what is going on and what they mean by the words and stuff like that. But it does take a little bit. It takes a little bit of practice. It takes certainly a commitment to learning about this stuff. And so if you're feeling overwhelmed or if you have questions, please just be patient and we will get through it together. And yeah, so are people are saying my sound is going out? Okay, so George is saying that might just be her sound system. Okay, the sound sounds fine to me. So if the sound is sounding wonky to anyone else, please let me know. Anyway, what we're going to be watching today. So the socialists tricked me. I have to give the socialists credit. The socialists got one over on me. They did. And here's the thing. So we were going to be watching today. This is the Socialism website with their virtual program. And I'll make this a little bit bigger so you can see. And this is why this is a good lesson if you're going to be tracking socialism, guys. I learned my lesson today. You can never, ever, 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 ever let your guard down with the socialists, because I had planned to watch this keynote. The Conspiracy is Capitalism: Making Sense of the Paranoid Right and the Tasks of the Left with Naomi Klein. That is what I had planned for us to watch today. And they had streamed it online. It was on their YouTube channel. And then maybe they got wind that I was going to watch it for Socialism Saturday, because I mentioned it the other day. And as soon as I mentioned in one of my streams that I was going to watch it for Socialism Saturday, look what happened. Hang on. They set the video to private. As soon as I said, "Hi, socialists, I know you're watching," because as soon as I announced that we were going to watch that video for Socialism Saturday, it was on their YouTube channel. Everything was fine. I didn't bother to download it. And then all of a sudden, the video was made private. Oh, I wonder what happened there. But that's okay, socialists. That's okay, socialists, because I have a backup plan. And the backup plan is we're going to watch this one, Fascism, Past, Present, and Future. And it is still live on their YouTube channel. And don't worry, socialists. If you take this one off your YouTube channel, socialists, I have it downloaded. I took care of it. Just in case you want to make this video private midstream, you want to play some of your socialist games that you guys like playing, I already downloaded it for a backup copy. All right. But I actually do think this presentation is going to be just as good. And the description of this presentation is, how can we best understand the right in the US and internationally? The history of fascism as a concept has gone through many iterations. This session will explore the meaning and relevance of the term, but also look at contemporary manifestations of fascist politics and how to confront them. Now, as I read the bios, I want to put a pop quiz out there in the chat. If you are new to the channel, I do pop quizzes on the channel all the time. This is meant to keep you on your toes and to make sure that you are learning stuff, because the purpose of this stream is as a learning stream. What does Fascism mean? According to socialists, for people who've been here for a while, how do the socialists define the term fascism? Really? Let us know in the chat how the socialists define the term fascism. And while you guys are doing that, I will read the bios. We've got Ilya, who is a political researcher working as a visiting scholar in the program in critical theory, UC Berkeley. Oh, look at that. The University of California at Berkeley has a whole program in critical theory. What is another word for critical theory? That's going to be Marxism, ladies and gentlemen. And yes, everyone knows fascism, according to socialists, means capitalism, 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 free market capitalism. We have them on video saying this. Socialists define fascism as anyone who is a capitalist. Exactly. So our first presenter is going to be in the critical theory program at the University of California, Berkeley. I know we are deeply shocked to find a socialist at the University of California, Berkeley. That's just I never would have seen that coming. And then we've got Alberto. Alberto teaches in the School of Communications at Simon Fraser University. I don't know where that is. And co-directs the Center for Philosophy and Critical Theory at Goldsmiths, University of London. So that's what we're going to be watching today, guys. So we're going to listen to socialists talk about fascism. Of course, we always have to keep in mind that they are talking about fascism from the perspective of a socialist. So this is not necessarily going to be like hinged into reality or anything like that, because they're talking about what fascism means to them, which may not actually have anything to do with the actual definition of fascism. So a couple orders of business before we get started. Of course, I always forget to get my socialism bingo card up first. Hang on. We do play socialism bingo on Socialism Saturday. I'm going to go ahead and pop this bingo card in the chat. Everyday Therapist says Simon Fraser is in Canada. Oh, a Canadian socialist. Okay. There's your bingo chat card in the chat on YouTube, and here it is in the chat on Rumble. Thank you everyone who's watching on Rumble today. I'll pop out the Rumble chat just so I can see it while we are chatting, and if you guys want to go ahead and interact, that'd be pretty great. This is a learning session, so I do ask for interactions and ask you guys questions every now and again. We hit generate card, and that is going to hang on. That's going to give us a free square in the middle. And then we do lines and we do corners. If you get a bingo, shout out bingo in the chat. Of course, we do have an extra solidarity because we are solidarity twice. It's our own little version of equity on the socialism bingo card. So that's just a fun game we play to keep ourselves interested as we are working our way through our Socialism Saturday. Of course, if you want to support the work I'm doing, the very best way you can support the work I'm doing is by being a paying member of my Substack, which is $8 a month or $80 a year. Someone's got to pay for the journalism that people like Jack Posobiec will inevitably steal and claim it as their own. But for real, guys, you know, I've talked about this. It cost me about $3,000 to go to Chicago to cover the socialism conference. That's money I pay out of my own pocket, guys. But I do reinvest pretty much everything I make from the Substack back into more infiltrations. And there is another infiltration I want to do this year. And not only do I want to bring myself, I want to bring a second person to get maximum coverage possible. And so the way I'm going to be able to fund that is through Substack subscriptions. Or if you want to join my locals, that's fine. If you want to join my Patreon, that's fine. If you want to become a member of this here YouTube channel, that's fine. Sending in super chats is fine. But my ideal is to have as many people as possible as paying members in my Substack for a couple of reasons. Number one, this is where you're going to get my best content. This is where you're going to get, like, it's just my content hub on the internet. So I think it's just the place that I'm really focusing on. Not that I don't do the others too, but this is the place that I'm focusing on. Number two, when you sign up as a member of my Substack, either on a monthly or an annual basis, you give me an ability to plan how much money I'm going to have coming in. And that way I can make plans for what conferences I want to cover, what things I want to infiltrate, what things I want to take you guys inside of. And so it really does help me out to be able to have that kind of forward-looking view. It's only $8 a month or $80 a year. And like I said, like people have been stealing the journalism that I took from this conference. Really big names, people with huge huge platforms. We're talking about millions and millions of people have been stealing my content that I paid to produce out of my own pocket because I just work by myself. And so if people don't support the work I'm doing, your conservative influencers like Jack Posobiec are going to have no one to steal from. So someone's going to make the content, guys. I'm more than happy to do it. But if you do appreciate it and you can support the work I'm doing, I do greatly appreciate it. Another way you can support the work I'm doing is by heading over to my merch store, which is unwokeart.com, where you can get things like this, the Socialists Always Lie t-shirt. It is one of my favorite. You can also get an official Socialism Saturday Join the Cult t-shirt. You can also get this t-shirt, one of my signature t-shirts called Be Bourgeois, because of course the bourgeois is code for capitalist. Bourgeois is code for property owner, landlord, all the things that socialists hate. And we, of course, want to be all the things that socialists hate. And so that merch is available in the Unwoke Art store. We've also got lots of other merch to include the Trump indictment victory shirt. People are loving this shirt. It's one of my best-selling products ever. We've got Trump doing the V symbol on the front. And then, of course, all of the Trump indictments printed on the back. The current list of indictments is available now. We've got the Trump mugshot merch. Of course, we've got Trump's mugshot on a mug with Trump looking dapper. And Trump really just did capture the right kind of vibe for that mugshot. And of course, I framed him in gold because Trump deserves the best. And then we've got all sorts of other stuff too, to include things like the All Tears Are Tasty tumbler and lots of other good stuff as well. So if you guys want to support the work I'm doing, that is a great way to do it. All right, guys, before we get started with our video today, a couple of notes. One, for anyone who is new here, I do not have an unmoderated chat. Listen, we have a good time. We joke, we banter, we drink. I'm going to be drinking tonight a strawberry cider from Down East Cider Company. And I just had this. I wasn't going to buy this. I just went to the beer store to buy this, and it took half an hour when it should have taken 10 minutes. But okay. But I just tried this. They had a little cider tasting. I got to say, this was a really good cider. And it's also red, which of course I do like to drink red drinks for Socialism Saturday. And so if you have drinks, let us know what you're drinking in the chat. But I want to say this. We have 2 rules we technically have 3 rules. I'll go through the 3 rules. Number 1, because this is a learning environment, no shit posting, guys. No bullshit, no nonsense. Do not insult me. Do not insult other people in the chat. I can do whatever I want because you guys are in my house. And so I can do whatever I want to do. But you will not insult me. You will not insult other people in the chat. If you do that, then you're probably not going to be here for very long. Number 2, no whining. Because if I tell you to stop doing something, I just want you to stop doing it. I don't want excuses. I don't want complaining. I'm not doing that thing you told me to stop doing, because you are doing that thing I told you to stop doing. And if you don't stop doing it, I'm going to ban you from the chat. Rule number 3 is we have a pet socialist on the channel. Her name is Autumn. Autumn is in the chat for everything, and we keep Autumn around because she gives us interesting information about being a socialist. However, Autumn is a pain in the ass. And so the no bullying rule does not apply to Autumn. If you guys want to bully Autumn, I really don't care, because Autumn is here of her own volition. And I probably should have banned her a long ass time ago, but she's a socialist. And sometimes having a pet socialist can be helpful. And so if you guys want to bully Autumn, I don't really care. And Autumn, I don't care how you feel about it, because I think she really likes the attention. So rule number 1 does not apply to Autumn. It does apply to everyone else. No, rule number 3 did not get canceled. You are still able to be bullied, Autumn. Okay, a couple things about socialism for people who are new. First of all, who is new to Socialism Saturday? Are there any people who are new here who haven't watched before? Let me know in the chat. Because here's the thing, guys. I've been telling people all week, you cannot just go and infiltrate a socialism conference. You can't just walk up to a socialist event and fit in and understand what they're saying, because socialists speak in code. Okay, so we've got Fontalan is new. We've got AM is new. Let's welcome to all of our new people who are here. I want to congratulate you on showing up. We've got the new IKB is new. Melissa is new. Lacey is new. Grant, this is his second time. Okay. Excellent. Here's the thing, guys. If you're new to socialism and you do not understand what they're saying, it's not you, it's them. Okay. Lone Wolf is new. Welcome, Lone Wolf. John. Welcome, John. Because socialism takes a little bit of getting used to. This is a learning opportunity. The whole point of Socialism Saturday is to learn what real socialists are saying. These are the farthest left of the far left. These are real socialist activists, all right? So it might differ from what your conservative right-wing influencers have told you that socialism is, because none of them watch this stuff like we do, all right? So if you feel overwhelmed, if you come here with right-wing talking points, you will be called out. It's like, if you feel overwhelmed, you don't understand what they're saying, that's normal, okay? Make sure that you are asking questions in the chat. The chat will also provide commentary on what they think the socialists are saying. I will do my very best to break it down and to make it understandable on like a human level. But this is a learning opportunity for all of us, and we all have to help each other learn. That's why I have the no shit posting rule. That's why we really do focus in. And guys, if you bring right-wing talking points into my chat, I'm going to explain to you that they're not real. The right does not understand the left nearly as much as they think they do. And it's very important, if we're going to do this, and especially if you want to find yourself at a socialist event just like I did, you have to understand exactly what the left thinks, not what the right thinks the left thinks. Okay, because those are two different things. So I will do my very best to explain it. And I hope you're all here to learn and we have a good time. And yeah, that's all there is to it. So guys, please go ahead and mount that like button for me. Mounting the like button lets other people to know to come join us. There's a shocking disparity between the number of people who are watching right now and the number of people who have mounted that like button. So please do me a solid and mount that like button, and I will get our stream here set up and we will get this party started. We are watching Fascism, past, present, and future. And this was a real presentation from the Real Socialism Conference that I infiltrated last week. So let's learn what the socialists believe fascism is. I had to sit through 3 days of this stuff. Keep that in mind. Hang on. There's always little... Okay, we'll fast forward a little bit until they get started. They're still digging around.
Well, thank you all for joining us. I see we have all of the cheerful people who want to spend their Saturday evenings talking about fascism. Welcome.
Yay!
This will be the panel Fascism, Past, Present, or Future. Just to make sure you're in the right place, you can run now if this is not where you're meant to be. Otherwise, before we get going, quick announcement. You guys have probably all heard it by now, but just in case.
They said this in every
Socialism
session.
Conference attendees are required to wear
session.
masks, fully covering the nose and mouth while indoors in conference spaces, including hallways and meeting rooms. Speakers from the front of the session may remove their masks in order to deliver their presentations, but only while actively speaking, and audience members are still required to wear masks even while asking questions or making comments. The mask policy is in place to protect all of us, especially the immunocompromised, from the risk of contracting.
So I want to say this. A lot of them use fake British accents. I don't understand why this is, but they'll actually tell you that they're using a fake accent. It's weird. I don't get it.
COVID-19. The conference community safety plan relies in part on badge checkers at the door of each room, and all attendees are expected to wear their conference badges at all time to enter conference meeting rooms. Please respect the badge checkers and know they are here to support a safe conference. You can see registration.
Okay. So Lacey is asking, so do they wear masks because they're really scared of the virus, or is it like their uniform? Okay. Socialists believe they're part of a collective. Okay, we like normal people like us tend to believe in individualism. That means we need to take care of ourselves, and I may worry about you, I may not worry about you, but it's like my choice whether or not I worry about you, right? Socialists don't see themselves as individuals. Socialists see themselves as part of a collective. And so the reasons for the mask is I think that they are actually afraid of the virus. I think that they think that the pandemic is still a thing. And so I think that they really do believe that they are protecting their fellow comrades by wearing a mask, even though, of course, science might not back that up. Don't quote me on that. I'm just stating an opinion, YouTube. But like, they really do believe that they're protecting each other, and there's this deadly pandemic that's still going on, because that's just that it's weird. I don't know. Socialists don't believe in science. Socialists believe in the collective and the Borg.
If you have any problems. So thank you. I can see everybody's wearing masks. We really appreciate that. I'm Rosie. I'm an editor at Verso. This is a panel put on by Verso Books. You can find many of our books in the wonderful book room, which I encourage you to check out, including the books of our speakers that you can see in front of them. So on my far right, although certainly not politically, I have Alberto, and closer to me, Ilya. They're each going to speak for 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up for discussion. The way that we'll run that is I'll open up Stack. If you can raise your hand when you want to speak, I will call on you, and if you could form a queue behind this microphone in the middle, that would be really helpful. Keep the conversation.
So what she means when she says stack is a reference to progressive stack. What does progressive stack mean? So socialist conferences are run a little bit differently than like every other conference I've ever been to. And I've been to a metric ton of conferences. How socialist conferences work is they basically have a couple of speakers on their panel. They're 90 minutes long. The sessions are, but you can see it's about an hour and a half session. And they have a couple of panelists, and the panelists each get up and they do a talk. Oftentimes they're reading off of a paper or a pre-prepared speech. And then what they do is they open Stack. And Stack is when people can line up behind a microphone in the middle of the room, and they line them up based on the woke oppression hierarchy. So if you are like a Black trans woman, you're going to be the first person to be picked in line. Right? If you're a white man, you're probably going to be the last person to be picked in line, because they line people up based on their woke oppression points. And there's no arguing about it. It's not like the DSA convention that you guys saw from a couple years ago. It's basically she's going to pick out people based on like the woke oppression hierarchy, and then they're going to get to speak in that order. And they can say whatever they want. They can talk about what they're doing. They can ask for help. They can ask a question. But they can say whatever they want. It doesn't even really need to be related to the presentation. But that's how this works. So we're going to see a panel presentation for about half of it, and then they're going to open Stack, and people can say whatever they want, and the presenters may respond to it. They may not respond to it.
Going. If you could keep contributions to 3 minutes or less so that everybody has a chance to speak. We've got a big crowd in here tonight, so it would be really respectful to everybody here to make sure that we can hear from as many people as possible. This session is being live streamed by the camera at the back, just so that you're all aware. And hello to anybody watching now or in the future. Yeah, I think that's everything from me. Each of our speakers will introduce themselves and then tell you a little bit about what they think about fascism, past, present, or future. Alberto, I think you're up first.
Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along, and to the organizers for putting on such a
He's the
formidable
Canadian.
and
A
little closer. Okay, so again, thank you all very much for coming, and to the organizers for putting on such a formidable event, logistically, politically, and so on. And also thank you very much for Rosie for sharing this, but also especially for being wonderful editor.
So you know what's funny, bot? So you know what's funny? I was looking at the Instagram page of our favorite Abolish the Family Socialist the other day, and she posted, her name is Sophie Lewis. She was at the conference. Sophie and I have a love-hate relationship. We're working it out, okay? And I was looking at her Instagram page, and Sophie posted a whole series of pictures of her from the conference. And one of the pictures was of the audience of one of her sessions, and I was in it, except Sophie blacked out my face. She went, when she was posting a picture of her in the entire room, and she blacked out my face. It was the funniest shit that I've seen like all day. Hi, Sophie. We love you. We want you on the channel. Sophie and I are working it out. It's cool. Thank you for the super chat, tune in, drop out. I understand CRT to be derived from communist and socialist ideology. Yep. How do the socialists attending this conference compare to those pushing the CRT agenda? Are they basically the same people? Great question. They are exactly the same people. There was an entire section on critical race theory in the bookstore. They're selling all the same books. So they are the same people who are pushing CRT in schools are at this conference. The same people who are pushing Black Lives Matter in schools are at this conference. The same people who are pushing anti-racist education, which comes from Marxism, is at this conference. The same people who are pushing gender ideology in schools, which comes from queer Marxism, are at this conference. They are all the same people. Every single woke thing that you guys see showing up in the world comes from the same people at this conference. That's why we pay so much attention to them. Thank you for asking this question.
And making sure that every one of my sentences has at least one or two fewer subclauses than would be my terrible habit to introduce. So hopefully I'll make any readers' lives a little less unpleasant. So I think I'll just say a few words about the origin and the framing of the book and my thinking behind the book, very much with the aim of opening up a conversation, because I'm a little bit more interested in hearing from you than hearing from myself after having thought about a particularly unpleasant subject for a little too long. The origins perhaps are the most obvious and perhaps maybe even banal aspect of such a project. There's very obvious reasons why you're all sitting here and we're talking about fascism. From my perspective, I was particularly struck by the intense but often dispiritedly superficial circulation of the term, both in major media, everyday conversation, and so on. And that really triggered the need to...
Hang on. Grant has a misperception, and this is a misperception that's been perpetuated by the right. They don't care if you're a white man. Look who's speaking on the stage right now. White man. The other guy, you look kind of Jewish, so he might not be white, but like white man. Like, these are white men. Socialists have no problem with white men. They really don't. This is a myth that's been perpetuated by the right, not by them. Socialists don't care if you are a man or a woman. Socialists don't care if you are white or black or brown. Socialists don't care if you are trans or cis. They only care that you adhere to their ideology. If you adhere to their ideology and you're a white man, you are fine. If you don't adhere to their ideology and you're a black trans woman, then you are the enemy, okay? It is only about the ideology, nothing else. Has Sophie said anything about Oh, this is actually interesting because I have had a little correspondence with our ginger dragon, Sophie. And I asked her, I said, Sophie, I have to know, did you recognize me? And Sophie claims that she didn't recognize me. She claims that she didn't recognize me. But I find it a little suspicious that in the picture she posted, my face is blacked out when I was just sitting as a member of the audience. I was wearing a mask and everything. Why is my face blacked out if Sophie didn't recognize me? I'm just saying.
Turn to what I see as a much broader and largely unexplored archive of theories of fascism to gain some kind of orientation in this particularly unpleasant conjuncture in which we find ourselves. And my irritation, which I think is not a bad place where to start producing any kind of critical theory, largely had to do with what I saw as the trap of a broadly liberal and largely Cold War optic on our discussions of fascism.
Hang on, Jane's got a question in the chat. Dr. K, don't you think these attendees of the conference are more than useful idiots? Wouldn't it be proof that they're true believers? Maybe. Well, you have to understand that a lot of people that are involved in this ideology have been brought up in this ideology. They don't know anything differently. It's been the thing that's been pushed on them by everyone they've ever trusted. And so I do think that there were a fair number of people there who I do think there were a fair number of people there who honestly and truly believe that their revolution is going to make the world a better place. I really, really do. The vibe at the conference, and this might surprise people, it wasn't a bad vibe. I felt much more comfortable. Okay, if I hadn't been in disguise and undercover and afraid of getting the crap beat out of me, generally speaking, I actually feel much more comfortable in the environment they create than I did at like CPAC. And because it's like anyone can really like they don't judge you based on the same things that conservatives do. And so I understand why it's something that people want to be a part of. It definitely does have like like an accepting atmosphere for people that you can be weird or you can be like forgotten or you can be like a discarded member of society and still fit in there. So I get it from that respect. So I think it's touch and go. Do I think there were true believers at the conference? Of course there were true believers at the conference. But do I think that they were all true believers? No. I also think there were a lot of so there were like two different types of socialists at the conference. A lot of them, maybe not a lot of them, probably like 30% of them we're talking like people who became socialists like during the 60s and the 70s. These are your hippies, like your anti-war hippies. They're not the same as Antifa. Anti-war hippie socialists are not the same as revolutionary Antifa socialists. Anti-war hippie socialists are like more useful idiot type people. Revolutionary socialists are the ones that will cut you. And it's important to know the difference.
A kind of common sense that I think also seeps into the discourse and the horizons even of people on the radical and revolutionary left at times. Not so much as might be the case in the mainstream by seeing fascism as the opposite of liberalism and liberalism as the antidote of fascism, but rather in a more maybe even methodological vein in looking for analogies between events and processes and figures from our present to what we think we know or what we think we understand about the historical and political events happening in interwar Europe, principally in Germany, Italy, and not solely there. And I think that analogical framing, which is, I guess, the main critical, polemical target from which I start, but hopefully I get past it relatively quickly, is one which I think is immensely powerful and present and has political consequences, right? Has political consequences in how people imagine forms of resistance to fascism, in how people name forms of fascism, and in how people think their own anti-fascism. I won't go too much into that, really, because I think largely maybe in this audience, people are probably familiar with the, X is like Hitler mode of thinking and the rather pernicious places that it lands us in.
Hang on, I want to acknowledge cheesecake. First of all, I do not approve of your name. Cheesecake is delicious, all right? Okay, maybe not all cheesecake because, not everything is good of every category, but cheesecake in general is delicious, and I think you might be a terrorist for that name alone. However, you said, I listened to a full live stream at work on Friday. You blew my mind in a good way. I really did underestimate the enemy. And the reason I brought this up is there are a lot of people who underestimate the socialists. And you'll see this online all the time. They're called, libtards, which when they're not liberal. Socialists hate liberals, by the way. They hate liberals. They hate Democrats. They hate the Democratic Party. They call them neoliberal. They do not like them at all. But they're not mentally ill. They're not deranged. They're not stupid. These people are very smart and very motivated and very focused on the goal, okay? And so people really need to be aware of that. The minute that you underestimate these people is the minute that you lose. And so it drives me crazy when I see people on the right just dismissing socialists and the far left as mentally ill libtards because those mentally ill libtards are kicking your ass. They are winning and they're winning very, very aggressively. And so it's important to not underestimate them because they're so much more focused than the right. It's not even funny. No, it's not terrible to like anything from Costco. Things from Costco are generally good, especially the hot dogs.
I wanted maybe to say something about the perhaps rather mystifying or perplexing title of the book and why I chose it. Not really, but maybe distantly as a nod to, Fred Jameson's late Marxism, but rather, I think out of the realization that there was something, for me at least, perplexing about the massive return or resurgence of certain fascist styles and symbols and modes of political thinking or of experience in a situation which politically and economically seemed to be so radically different than the one that is often used in the kind of journalistic shorthand of Weimar or something along those lines, right? And that in a way, the fix for capitalism that classic fascism had proposed, which was a fix that had to do with mass class struggles, a certain type of global economic crisis, and of course, the late arrival of certain powers.
Tori is asking a question. So is the main difference between liberals that liberals support capitalism and socialists don't? Essentially. Socialists want to abolish all private property. And by the way, guys, I'm using the terms socialist, communist, and Marxist pretty interchangeably. So anytime I'm saying the term socialist, I also mean communist and Marxist. The reason I use those terms interchangeably is because they use the terms interchangeably. So I'm following their language if you're confused about the difference. So generally speaking, socialists want to abolish all private property. That includes your home, that includes your car, that includes your kitchen, which they don't want private kitchens in the homes because they want you going to the communal kitchen to get your food with the community. That's one of the ways they're going to abolish the family. That includes your business. They don't want you privately owning a business. And that includes your children. They do not want children being, quote unquote, the private property of their parents. So, of course, liberals don't want to do those things. And so that is kind of the main difference. I'm sure they would offer that there's other differences as well, but do they believe they are good people? Yes. They believe they're good people. They're basically in a cult, guys. They really are. And there are some there's something. I really think that a lot of them believe that what they are doing is going to make people's lives immeasurably better, and that's why they're doing it. And they haven't taken the time to understand the logical conclusions of what they're doing and how it's worked out every other place before, because they really will be the first to tell you. And we've seen them. There was a whole presentation at the very beginning of Socialism Saturday that was literally about real socialism has never been tried. So they really do say that. And they really believe that they're going to get socialism right this time and it's going to be better for everyone. And some of them, I really do think that some of them are very well-meaning people. They really do want people's lives to be better. I think a lot of them are rich. They're feeling guilty about the fact that they're rich. They're rich and white. And so this is their way of coping with their internalized guilt, I guess. But I really do think that they believe that. Is the goal civil war? No. Well, their goal is revolution, but there's not going to be a civil war, guys. The right is way too lazy. There's never going to be a civil war. The right would sooner roll over and die. I'm glad my cousin introduced me to you, Dr. K. In this short amount of time, I've learned more from you than from what I have watched with Tim and Crowder, etc. And they have no idea about this. Nope, they have no idea about it at all. And I just want to take a screenshot because that's a really nice compliment. Thank you. No, they have. I tried to tell Tim about this. I did. I tried to tell him about it. What'd he do? He blocked me on Twitter. Because Tim would much rather learn from the quartering. The quartering is so much of a better activist than I am. But I did try to tell Tim about it. He didn't listen. Let me see. Yes, Trendolin, I've downloaded all the video. Don't worry, I learned my lesson. No, Brian, this is wrong. The right does not own all the guns. A lot of the socialist groups are arming themselves. This is wrong. That's a right-wing talking point. That's not a left-wing talking point. There are a lot of socialist groups that are arming themselves, guys. There are a lot of Antifa groups that are arming themselves, especially in Texas. It's not true that they don't own guns. They do own guns. Let's see. I saw a super chat come in. Tune in Dropout says, when you say socialists are beating conservatives, do you mean pushing their economic theory or regarding social issues being pushed with critical theories? Both. They're beating on both accounts. But how socialists are really kicking the ass of conservatives is socialists control institutional power in this country. They own every major institution. What that means is they don't have to win elections to gain power. If they win elections, fine. They'll get more power if they win elections. But even if conservatives win elections, which elections are the only ways that conservatives really try to gain power, they still lose to the socialists because the socialists have institutional power, which means they control all the universities, they control K through 12 education, they control the news media, they control Hollywood. This is why you've seen all their ideas show up over and over and over and over and over and over and over again throughout everything because they control the institutions. Conservatives ceded all ground in terms of the major institutions that are forming culture in society to focus on elections that they're losing. And so the socialists are kicking their asses on pretty much every front because they have institutional power. Brian, no, they're not. Conservatives aren't going to do shit. Conservatives are way too lazy. I'm sorry. We're going to be hinged into reality on this channel, Brian. I'm sorry. Let's see. Just want to make sure I've got all the questions. And again, folks, welcome to anyone that's new to Socialism Saturday. If you have questions, let us know in the chat.
Including obviously Germany and Italy, onto the scene of imperialism. All of that seemed to be out of time and out of step with our moment. Not only, but one of the things that I found very striking, and possibly the reason why that idea of lateness came to mind, was the fact that many of the movements of the contemporary
Hang on, got another super chat from the new IKB. Thank you. If they are so smart, why are they seemingly immune to logic and facts? Why do they have to be? Why, like, what? And thoughts on, I don't know Tick History. I've heard good things about Tick History, but I've never watched Tick History. I actually do agree with you that monarchy is better than socialism. I actually think the monarchy is actually a pretty decent system because it's like a full safe measure about going into war. There's also consistency about it. Like, I actually am this is going to get me in trouble. I'm a fan of monarchy. I like monarchy. I think monarchy is a good system. Like, I think what they've got in England is good. I think it's good. Anyway, why are they so seemingly immune to logic and facts? That has nothing to do with whether or not they're winning, bro. Like, they're socialists are so smart that they don't need to buy into facts and reality at all, and they still win. Like, how crazy is that? Can we really think about that for a second? Socialists can flat out ignore facts and reality, and they still win. That's how smart they are about what they're doing. How do you stop it? I don't think we can. I mean, if I'm honest about it, I think they're going to win, and I think they're going to win big. But if you want steps for how to stop it, the very first step is that we have to know what they're doing. If people don't know what they're talking about and they don't know what they think because they're engaging in internet conspiracy theory and nonsense, we have no hope. And right now, and I'm going to be very blunt, I firmly believe that my community of people are some of the only people on the internet who actually know what real socialists are doing. And I'm not patting myself on the back too much. It's just that we've watched so much of it. And you got to understand that when you watch real socialism like multiple times a week for a full year, the right's conception of what socialists are is laughable. The right has no idea what's going on. We are the people that have been watching this with me for a full year. We are a good 2 years ahead of where people on the conservative right are thinking about this right now. So the very first step to stopping it is people have got to sit down. They've got to put aside their preconceived notions of what's going on, and they have to listen. They have to learn what these people are saying. They have to learn the language they're using. They have to learn what they're up to. If we can't do that, we are going to lose. The only way to stop this is by learning their language and being able to identify when it shows up in the world and what they really mean and what they intend to do. And so it's not an easy answer. This problem has been building over the course of 100 years in this country. The Frankfurt School landed at Columbia University 100 years ago. They've been slowly taking over ever since. So it's like when you gain 100 pounds, you can't lose 100 pounds overnight. You have to lose that 100 pounds slowly over time, right? It's the same thing with this. There is no big grand solution that's going to solve this problem. The only thing that's going to solve this problem is by doing the things we always should have been doing. And the very first step is understanding who they are and understanding what they're talking about. And I wish I had an easier answer. I really did. But that's the reality. Let's see. Well, homeschooling your children isn't going to stop it, but homeschooling your children is going to get them out of the socialist reach. And so, yes, you should absolutely be homeschooling your children, but that's not going to stop them, but it's going to protect your children. And so that sometimes is going to be good enough. If you want to pick up previous Socialism Saturdays, just search for Socialism Saturday on the channel. I have kind of a half-cocked playlist that doesn't have all the Socialism Saturdays in there, but if you literally just search for Socialism Saturday on the channel, you're going to get a whole bunch of information. Let's see. All right, let's keep going. By the way, Yasmin, Nick Fuentes is back on Twitter and he's following me again. I swear to God. He has a Grimace account.
Are right, and which we might or might not, let's see, in discussion, be tempted or oriented to describing as fascist, are movements whose largely nostalgic frame is weirdly for a post-fascist period, right? That is for a kind of racially coded, masculine, industrial 1950s, rather than for necessarily the rather demanding and
yeah, I'll
rather
send it to you,
martial
Yasmin.
character of interwar fascism. So, as I said, faced with this kind of situation, I thought that it seemed to me necessary to turn to theories of fascism that had been
It's
produced
in his
not
Telegram,
just
Yasmin. I'll get it to you in a second, though.
the Marxist left, though also across the 20th century. And actually, the real turning point, I think, in my thinking about to what extent we could discuss and how we could discuss fascism in the present was really to realize that the period that is perhaps most maligned in respectable.
Hang on, Lacey's asking, do you think the catchphrase of running for local government is not going to solve this problem? Although running for local government can be like an interesting stopgap of throwing sand in their gears to make sure at least your community is protected. But again, socialists aren't running for political positions. Socialists are gaining institutional power from which they cannot be removed by an election, okay? So they're gaining power in a much smarter way that does not involve them ever getting voted out of office ever. But that doesn't mean there's not value in taking over your local government. Local government is much more effective than national politics, that's for damn sure. And so why not, like, get some good libertarian policies in your area? I think that's a good idea. Tori, if you don't understand what he's saying, it's because he's not really saying anything yet. This is the problem with socialism, guys. We have to go through a lot of boring shit. It's why we do banter and Q&A in the chat and stuff like that. There's a lot of word salad. There's a lot of saying 5 things when one word would do, okay? So he's not really saying anything yet. You aren't missing anything. But when he starts saying something, we'll start pointing it out.
Academic scholarship about fascism, that is to say the 1970s, was really probably the best place to turn to, not necessarily for theories or positions that could be applied, but for a conjuncture and for a political situation that bore much more continuity with our own, and which I think also generated insights which are far more relevant than necessarily those which would take us to, let's say, the most kind of classic debates of the Third International or what have you. In particular, I was really inspired in my work by a concept that
Occubot.
last night's keynote speaker, Angela Davis, formulated partly in dialogue with Herbert Marcuse, but also in correspondence with another imprisoned revolutionary, George Jackson. And this is the concept of preventive counter-revolution. One of which incidentally is actually a concept that had been first proposed by an Italian anarchist, Luigi Fabbri, in 1922, then also used by Rajani Palm-Dutt in Fascism and Social Revolution in the 30s. But the specific way in which it was articulated, both by Marcuse and especially by Angela Davis, I thought was very significant, because it spoke to thinking about what does fascism mean in moments in which you're not witnessing the response to what were thwarted or failed revolutions, Italy and Germany in the 1920s, but rather powerful, if partly inchoate and complex movements that threatened aspects of the status quo, but were not necessarily...
Well, hang on. Cheesecake is gross. And I'm going to get you to change this name at some point, bro. But it says, I think the main reason I underestimated them came from the spuging, outrage, cringe videos online that made them all seem laughable despite how destructive they are. Guys, this is the problem. I'm going to be honest. TikTok isn't real. Libs of TikTok, the stuff that Libs of TikTok shares, although I understand that it's funny to watch and it makes you laugh and all this stuff, it gives a really distorted perception of what's actually going on. And so it makes it seem that the people who are running like the socialism things, there are these crazy multi-haired people that are just reeing and crying and acting foolish, when that's not who's actually doing it. And so it does give a very distorted perception of reality and makes it very easy to underestimate them. I'm gonna be honest, Libs of TikTok is like the best friend of these people, because Libs of TikTok is setting their political enemies up to completely underestimate who they are and what they're doing. And it's all for likes and clicks and money. And so I guess my plea to people is, like, you have to be really discerning about what you're seeing, and you have to be discerning about who you're following. I'm not saying that you can't get joy out of laughing at these people, because some of them do really cringy shit and it's fun to laugh at, right? But if you really want to know what's going on, like, you don't see Libs of TikTok people at the socialism conference. You see very serious organizers.
Coalescing into a revolutionary force as such. And this idea of preventive counter-revolution, but also kind of preventive counter-violence, to use a notion introduced some time ago by Etienne Balabar, I think is quite useful to think about how fascism operates. From that insight that in many ways the origins of contemporary thinking about abolitionism are also largely the origins of useful contemporary thinking about fascism, to put it somewhat bluntly, I turned to thinking about the ways in which...
Brian, I'm going to be very blunt, bro. You have no clue what you're talking about. And I know we've been friendly, and I think you're a good guy. I really do. You have no clue what you're talking about. So my recommendation, Brian, is if you're going to be in this chat, what I need you to do is to talk less and listen more, because you do not understand who these people are, and you do not understand what they're doing. And I understand that, like, you haven't been with us for Socialism Saturday before, so I get it. But, like, I need you to talk less and listen more, and put aside the preconceived notions that you have, because they're not correct. I've been watching your messages in the chat. They're not correct.
And again, this is terrain that many historians and radical thinkers have, of course, mined, from Robin Kelly to Minka Makalani to many others. The production of what Cedric Robinson had called in some landmark essays from I think around the 1980s for a book that was planned but never
That's
finished.
the best cheese on the planet.
The Black Radical
Best
Conception
cheese
of
ever.
Fascism, and presenting a lineage of Black.
You guys are asking such good questions. I'm sorry I keep pausing. He's not really saying anything, but I'm glad you guys are asking good questions. Do you think socialists are boring and long-winded on purpose? Yes. We've talked about this on Socialism Saturday, where it's like, guys, how I trained to sit through 3 days of socialism is I sat here and watched boring socialism at least once a week for a full year. These people are boring on purpose. They want to bore us into not listening. They will bore us for a full hour, and then like that 15-minute clip is like the most insane thing you've ever heard in your life, but they will bore you for a full hour until you get to that 15-minute clip that is your golden nugget that ends up going viral on the internet. When I got that clip of the ALA president saying that she wants libraries to be a site of Marxist organizing, that was an hour and 15 minutes into the presentation that I sat there being bored up until that point for that 1-minute clip that changed everything, for that 1-minute clip that gave away the ball game. And so you've got to be here and you've just got to be bored, and you have to get used to being bored. This is why we have alcohol, and it's why we have crafting or like whatever you're doing, because you just need to work through it and you have to train yourself to sit through it.
Black theorists of fascism, including, of course, Aimé Césaire, George Padmore.
Hang on, I did miss a super chat from Rottweiler. Thank you, Rottweiler. Libs of TikTok, Matt Walsh, and your uninformed influencers are doing better PR for socialists by making them look like aimless loonies. That's exactly right. These people win when the right thinks they're insane. These people win when the right thinks they're mentally ill. These people win when the right thinks that all these people are the people you see on Libs of TikTok. These people win when Matt Walsh is attacking these people. The right is playing into their hands right now so beautifully, and they don't even know it. Thank you, Rottweiler.
And W.E.B. Du Bois. So this idea of a racial or colonial fascism as, I think, an absolutely crucial optic through which to destabilize common sense framings of fascism and perhaps move to a much more capacious understanding also of what anti-fascist politics might signify. This idea of racial fascism, incidentally, is one that was formulated by Amiri Baraka in a rereading of Black Reconstruction. Black Reconstruction, I think, and I don't fully argue in the book, but I've tried to argue in something I've written, which will hopefully come out in a book edited by Gio Mayer on Black Reconstruction. I think Black Reconstruction is a formidable theory of fascism, even though it is written almost exactly the same time as Du Bois wrote some not particularly perceptive things about German fascism, including about the economics of it. And even though the book says the word fascist only twice, I think its way of linking questions of class to capitalist strategies to what Du Bois in some stunning passages about racial terror in the South calls the shape of fear as what creates a kind of fascist subjectivity, so to speak, I think are truly kind of formidable.
Let's be very clear. James O'Keefe does not do undercover journalism. James O'Keefe has never done undercover journalism. What James O'Keefe does is take credit for the work of other people. I have covered this extensively. I am friends with a lot of people who worked with James O'Keefe. James O'Keefe did not do undercover journalism. James O'Keefe is the person who burned down Project Veritas. James O'Keefe is not someone that you should follow, is not someone that you should listen to, is definitely not someone you should hero worship. James O'Keefe is a narcissist that has put real undercover journalists out of a job through his own actions. The real people who were doing the real work to break the real stories are now no longer doing it because of James O'Keefe. Okay? So please do not compare me to James O'Keefe. I am not James O'Keefe. James O'Keefe never would have done what I did. And so I get very sensitive to when people compare me to him because he is not a good person, guys. He's really not. And you can go back and look at my research on that and you can see all the receipts. Do I think it does help by exposing their sick views specific? Well, I think it helps exposing their views, but I think like the problem is that there are still too many people who are not listening. There's still too many people who don't really understand this stuff. And so, does exposing it help? I mean, sure, I guess it helps get people interested in what they're doing. But what would really help is people sitting down and listening. That's the big thing that's going to help. And so, spreading the word, teaching people what you know, that's the biggest thing that's going to help.
And I think it was also through those sources that I guess two crucial issues came to the fore, which I think are very important for thinking about.
This is not why James O'Keefe didn't do undercover journalism. James O'Keefe never did undercover journalism. Not from the very beginning did James O'Keefe doing undercover journalism. And I'm going to be very honest, guys. Anyone who is a James O'Keefe simp in my chat is not going to be here for very long because I fundamentally question your intelligence. James O'Keefe is not a good person. We are not going to hero worship James O'Keefe on this channel. James O'Keefe never did undercover journalism. He stole from other people. And as someone who has had my journalism taken from other people, I'm a little sensitive to this.
Contemporary formations of fascism and also for advancing our debate. One, which was very forcefully put forward by Padmore in his idea of a colonial fascism that pertained to the British Empire in the 1920s and 30s, was this idea that we can speak of fascism before the emergence of self-defining fascist movements, right? Before 1920s Italy, let's say. And that indeed many of the forms of rule, many
Notice
of the
they haven't defined
patterns,
fascism yet.
many of the racial imaginaries that are formative of all sorts of different fascist projects are emergent with late 19th century imperialism and also, of course, the ideologies of the plantocracy in the South and so on. So this is an idea that is not only present in that tradition. So, for instance, the great Hungarian economist Karl Polanyi has a line which is one of the
What is a smart way to explain these types of subjects without sounding crazy? You need to accept that you're going to sound crazy for people who have not interacted with the subject matter. You're going to sound crazy. Every single day of my life, guys, I say the 4 goals of the woke left are the following: gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. I say that almost every day, and I sound crazy every time I do it. Until you say it enough that people start seeing it. Until you show them evidence and you show them receipts. And that's what I try to do on my Substack is I try to show you the receipts. Every time I make a claim, I try to show you a receipt to back up what I'm saying. Because if you can start to identify the patterns, really what we're trying to do is we're trying to get people to start identifying the patterns that are right in front of them. Some people are really good at identifying patterns. Some people are really not good at identifying patterns. I happen to be really good at identifying patterns. I'm really good at puzzles. I'm really good at things like chess and things like that. And so that's something that I just naturally pick up on very quickly. Not everyone does that. What we're trying to do is to make people aware of what's going on by showing them receipts so that when they start to see it in real life, then they're going to be able to identify it. Okay. So just accept the fact that you're going to sound crazy. They're not going to think you're crazy when they see what you're talking about. Well, so when they're speaking in circles, as this guy is doing, this guy has said nothing of value so far. When they're speaking in circles, what I want you to do is listen for the language. Listen for how they talk. listen for the words they're using, because those words are consistent across, like, the socialists in the room understand what he's saying because he's speaking in their socialist code. So you're learning how to speak the code even if it doesn't feel like you're learning anything. So just sit tight, work through it. It's all good.
Programs to the book, which says the problem of fascism is as old as capitalism. The threat was there from the start.
Oh! What did he just say? What did he just say? Look at the words on the screen. What did he just say? This is why we always have to be we always have to keep on our toes. What did this asshole just say? The problem of fascism is as old as capitalism. He just confirmed that fascism, as defined by socialists, means capitalism. That's what they mean when they say fascist. Let's go back and listen again. Even though it's on the screen, let's go back and listen again.
To the book, which says the problem of fascism is as old as capitalism. The threat was there from the start.
Thank you.
But I think the specific inflection given to it by these militant theorists of racial and colonial fascism is very key to the present. So in a way, I guess I sort of tried to engage in a kind of pincer movement of sorts by moving to the 1970s and perhaps the 1870s to get past the problems that come with solely articulating our thinking about fascism through the analogies of
cheesecake is gross. Get some extra points today. Fascism is capitalism, and capitalism means whiteness. Exactly. Whiteness means capitalism. Anytime you guys hear them say the terms whiteness, white supremacy, anti-racism, colonialism, it all means capitalism.
Again, an often poorly understood interwar period. I say poorly understood because amongst, and I talk about this relatively briefly in the book, but I think it's significant, among the questions that is often overlooked, or the features of fascism that are often overlooked in our accepting an image of fascism as necessarily a movement of mass enthusiasm and a movement that involves planned economies and so on and so forth, is the fact that if one reads the speeches of Mussolini right before and after the March on Rome, for instance, you have a set of statements and a program that are, in its own words, a form of violently imposed liberalism, right?
Violently
Mussolini
imposed
talks
liberalism.
about the
See,
fact
they hate
that
liberals.
the state has to get out of the railways, it has to get out of the schools, and he talks about basically the imperative of fascism not just being that of national rebirth and revanchism and imperialism, but also basically securing the freedom of private capital by public means. And that is at the core of fascism as it begins, right? In its now 101st-ish anniversary, right? So when, for instance, someone like Eduardo Galeano, the Uruguayan essayist, writes in the late 70s, he says, you know, in our countries, Adam Smith needs Mussolini. True, Mussolini, Adam Smith already needed for Mussolini in Italy, right? And that, I think, that genealogy is one that's covered over in this very clunky and imprecise way of presenting this dichotomy between, on the one hand, liberalism, markets, parliamentary freedoms, etc., and on the other hand, a fascism that is ipso facto treated as statist and as requiring the presence of mass movements. And that, I think, is something also Ilya will address, and he's written about very illuminatingly regarding the case of contemporary Russia. So those, I think, are some of the crucial aspects of how I wanted to sort of reframe and rephrase this problem. of fascism. How much time?
5 minutes.
Huh?
5.
5 minutes. Okay. And maybe I can just briefly summarize. It's easier to do 5 minutes whilst reading than whilst ad-libbing. So I'll just. So I wanted to just summarize, I suppose, in maybe 4.
Hang on. Tori is asking a question. Carlin, is this true? What is the Polian theory? For Polanyi, the core contradiction of Marxist society is that a system of self-regulating markets cannot. Tori, I have no idea. I have no idea. I am sorry, Tori. I don't know. If anyone else knows, please help Tori out because I don't know.
Points, some of the key lessons that at least I think I've drawn from trying to bring together, right, to compose these different strands in this multiple kind of archive.
Yeah, but I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know everything.
Theorizing of fascism, or thinking of fascism as Angela Davis had argued in the 70s, as a process, right, rather than as some ideal type, as something that is principally grasped through definitions. And I think this is also important because I think when we think of theories, or certainly in an academy dominated by analytical, liberal, political science kind of perspectives, the idea of a theory is the idea of a definition, right? A definition of something like a checklist, right? Like we could have the, a diagnostic manual for political disorders, and then we go around the world and we see country A, country B, and we say, okay, you have the 7 elements of fascism, so now you've entered into this category, and certain things will follow, right? Sanctions, bombings, or what have you. I think that's an extremely limiting way of thinking about what theorizing itself involves, thinking about what thinking is.
How can this ideology survive with such boring speakers? They don't think this is boring. There are a lot of people who don't think this is boring. There are a lot of people who have been trained over the course of their entire lives to sit through stuff like this and find it fascinating. Just because you think it's boring doesn't mean everyone thinks it's boring, okay? And so it can survive because the people who will sit through this type of stuff have significantly more discipline than people who won't. And people who have significantly more discipline will do things like spend hours and hours and hours and hours every day planning their little Marxist revolution. Like, people on the right, I was just talking about this with someone earlier today on the show I was on. People on the right, when they hold events, they dick around, they drink, they have photo ops, they play games, there's hookers and blow up in the hotel rooms that people aren't supposed to know about, but they do happen. That's like CPAC. CPAC is people dicking around and having photo ops and posting on social media and drinking and hookers and blow in the hotel room. People at the Socialism Conference are working all day, every day, from the moment they get up until the moment they go to bed at night, or maybe they do a little after party, but they are working all day, very disciplined, because they have the discipline to sit through stuff like this. Whereas people who are going to CPAC are dicking around and posting photos on social media and going out to the bar, the club, having their after parties. They don't do half of the work that the socialists do because the socialists are more disciplined.
Historically, about what totalizing, about thinking dialectically might mean faced with urgent political phenomena. And of course, we can discuss to what extent and in what moments is the activity of theorizing significant, and what difference does it make, right? And certainly all of the theorists, from Padmore to Davis to Jackson to Polanyi, who I've dealt with to some extent in the book, thought that it was pretty vital, and I think in many ways they showed us that it was. So I want to just end on what I see as 4 interlocking dimensions of the history and the experience of fascism that I think we should attend to. The first, and this will cover a little bit of some of the things that I've already said, but maybe bears repeating. So the first is that the practices and the ideologies that crystallized more or less laboriously into Italian fascism, German Nazism, or their European kin were presaged and prepared by the dispossession and exploitation of what were called by, infamously called lesser breeds without the law, wrought by settler colonialism, chattel slavery, and intra-European racial capitalism, or what some have also discussed as internal colonialism. It is one of my book's wagers that our late fascism cannot be understood and should not be understood without what we might call fascisms before fascism that accompanied the imperialist consolidation of a capitalist world system. Second, fascism has been differentially applied, experienced, and named across axes of race, gender, and sexuality in and within different geographical and historical locations. As we learned from the writings of incarcerated revolutionaries of color in the United States and elsewhere, political orders widely deemed liberal democratic can harbor institutions that operate as regimes of domination and terror for ample sectors of the population. In something like what, even referring to Nazi Germany, some theorists had called a racial dual state, right? A state that is a state of law for some and an exceptional state for others. And I think attending to those color, but also, color lines, but also lines of...
Here, Rottweiler's about to school us because Rottweiler is basically the smartest person in this chat. Polanyi attacked the notion of free market economies, which contributes to their class struggle shtick because it isn't sustainable socialist. So he attacked free markets. Okay. That makes sense, Rottweiler. Thank you for the clarification. Your help is appreciated as always.
Of gender, sexuality, and class that cut across polities and create this differential experience of fascism or of state terror is absolutely critical. This means that both in their political origins and their strategic imperatives, abolitionism and contemporary anti-fascism cannot be disjoined. Third, fascism is grounded in a modality of what I've already mentioned and called preventive counterviolence. Its desire for ethno-national rebirth or revanche is stoked by the imminence, or the imagined, the fantasized, the desired, maybe, imminence of a threat that's projected as civilizational, as demographic, as existential, as a great replacement by migrants, as a great disorder.
Thanks for coming. Cheesecake is gross. We're glad to have you in the audience. And I want to remind you, I want to encourage you, come back and watch the replay for the rest of the stream, because the Q&A section, the discussion section, is universally always the best part. We always get the most information out of it. So I would encourage you to come back and give that a watch when you get a chance. And that goes for everyone, guys. I know we have to get through the boring bit first, okay? But once we get to the Q&A session, it's game effing on.
Sexuality, and there's all sorts of other things. The epical tide about what the racist Lothrop Stoddard famously called the rising tide of color before being roundly embarrassed by Du Bois in a public debate, and what Oswald Spengler called, and was also echoed by one of his anonymous reviewers, Benito Mussolini, in the 1930s, the colored world revolution, that this epical panic that seeded the rise of fascism after the First World War has morphed barely into these narratives of replacement, substitution, or cultural suicide shared by mass shooters and European prime ministers, including my own, alike. I'm Italian, by the way, just in case you were trying to figure out. Fourth, fascism required the production of identifications
so
of
Canadian, it's not even
desires,
funny.
and forms of life, which do not simply demand obedience to despotic state power. This is one of these kind of just so stories about Cold War bedtime stories that we really need to get rid of. This idea of fascism as the pure snuffing out of liberty by the all-powerful state. And we need to face up to the fact that fascists did and continue to produce their own conceptions of freedom that make sense to them and that are antithetical to ours. But they are conceptions of freedom, right? They're not just, simply surface ornament, right? They are also
yes,
drivers.
Capitalism is freedom, bitch.
And the kind of core affects of certain politics. Whether in the guise
Capitalism
of
is
decentralized and
freedom.
deputized power or psychological wages, the fascist, which is in a sense a kind of fantasy synthesis of the settler and the soldier, or the settler and the cop, needs to imagine him or herself as an active participant shareholder in the monopoly of violence, as well as an enterprising petty sovereign, with race and nation serving as the effective and ideological vectors of that identification with power. So I think these are the kind of four, I'll just leave you with that. I think these are the kind of four.
For those who missed it earlier, what he means by fascism is capitalism. He said it earlier. Fascism means capitalism. He said it in a roundabout way, but he absolutely said it. And they always say it in the presentations like this. So his definition of freedom is whatever is anti-capitalism, is socialism, is communism. Whereas my definition of freedom, like, definitely hinges around free market capitalism. I'm going to be honest, but that's just me.
Dimensions of what I propose for collective use as some slightly different way of thinking about, or hopefully rather different way of thinking about fascism than the one that we might be accustomed to. So first, to think fascism in the longue durée, in the long history of colonial and racial capitalism. Second, to think fascism
Capitalism,
in the
he said it again.
differential experience of domination, the fact that fascism...
He literally just said it again. Let's go back and listen.
Use as some slightly different way of thinking about, or hopefully rather different way of thinking about fascism than the one that we might be accustomed to. So first, to think fascism in the longue durée, in the long history of colonial and racial capitalism. Second, to think
fascism is in the long history of colonial and racial capitalism. It's always about capitalism. Yes, Melissa, they are speaking in code. Almost every fancy word that they use will go back to capitalism at some point. So they are speaking in a code that only they understand. And they get away with redefining words, Sandy, because they thoroughly and completely commit to it. They commit to it. They commit that this is the definition of the word, and they do not budge. You can hold a dictionary right up in their face and it will make absolutely no difference, because they don't care what the dictionary says. They are fully and unapologetically committed to their words meaning what they say they mean. That's how they use them in context in their lectures. That's how they use them in context in their classes. And so other people learn the code by osmosis. The biggest benefit that you can get from watching Socialism Saturday is to learn how to listen for and speak their language. Because when you listen to their language and you learn how to speak their language, you will find people speaking their language that you never knew were socialists. And you're like, and you'll be like, I had someone in my community today. We had a supporter call in my community. And he was telling me how he was doing a training at work, and all of a sudden the person at work started throwing the trainer that his workplace brought in started throwing out words like, I mean, she was saying capitalism, but she didn't really mean capitalism. Or like she was saying capitalism is like, that was like a bad thing. She was saying words like, I don't really know, like liberation or things like that. She started saying socialist words, and he was like, you're a socialist, because he recognized the language from watching Socialism Saturday. And this person was just like showing up in his workplace, but it was obvious that where the training was coming from.
Fascism and the differential experience of domination, the fact that fascism can also take place in places that are not seen or declared or viewed as fascist. The fact that political violence is presented as preempting an imagined existential threat. And lastly, the production of fascist subjects as deputies of a kind of sovereign violence, right? And I think these are four dimensions that need to be thought about in their specificity for any contemporary anti-fascist politics to have any teeth. So,
anti-fascist means anti-capitalist. Oh, thank God. We get to listen to the other guy now. This is the professor from UC Berkeley.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here. And I think it's a very important discussion that we're having today. discussion not just about something happened in the past, but something happened today, happened right now in a very different forms and in different parts of the globe. But I think the importance
You're right,
of
German.
Our conversation about the fascism, conversation among the radical left is exactly because it again became an immediate threat for not just for the existence of the organized left, but for the existence of, let's say, organized society, of any forms of organized anti-capitalist,
you're right.
anti-market resistance. The Russian invasion, the brutal Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, starting past year, bring back energy to the current, not just debates about the fascism, but the rhetorics, let's say, over the fascism. So you can have on one side one of the lines of justification of the invasion from Putin, who is calling Ukraine a fascist state, and if you follow, you are successfully not following Russian speaking.
You would think he would be against the war in Ukraine. So there were several tables at the Socialism Conference that were extremely pro-Ukraine. I have pro-Ukraine literature in my bag that I picked up from these people. So no, they are very, very, very pro-Ukraine.
Media, but from all of their explanation, the definition of fascism is very simple. So fascists are just not Russians. It's those who are standing against the Russian state in the various forms. And Russians are kind of naturally anti-fascists just because they're Russians. This definition, this very simplistic definition, based...
Russians are naturally anti-fascist because they're Russians. Well, I'll tell you this. My husband's father, my husband grew up in Ukraine when the USSR was still intact. My husband's father still pines for the old days of the USSR, I will tell you that. Bocephus, Matt Walsh, and others say the socialists are weirdos, also say Fuentes and the new right are dumb. Is it just to maintain the status quo? Matt Walsh is interested in one thing and one thing only, and that is maintaining his money and maintaining his status. Matt Walsh has no redeeming qualities so far as I'm concerned. He creates a lot of problems. He solves zero problems that he creates. He steals things from other people and pawns them off as his own to make more money and maintain his status. So I would just recommend everyone stop listening to Matt Walsh. Would be my recommendation. Listen to people who are way smarter than Matt Walsh. Listen to people who are way better than Matt Walsh. Listen to James Lindsay. Listen to Michael Malice. There are any number of people who are like far, far, far effing superior to Matt Walsh that people could be listening to. Nick Fuentes is way smarter than Matt Walsh. I will say that. He is. But Nick Fuentes is also a little white identitarian, anti-Semite. He is. But Nick Fuentes is a smart... Nick Fuentes is an asshole, but he's a smart asshole.
On the pure belief on the naked force. So if you have enough force to call somebody fascist, that means that it's the existential enemy, the enemy that could be destroyed. You can't talk with fascists. You can't make any negotiations with fascists. So that is the meaning of this war from the Russian side, because Ukraine should be destroyed. It should be eliminated as a state, as a nation, and that is the main purpose of this war. And that was repeated 1,000 times. You can Google it in Russian if you want. So, but in the opposite, you have some kind of talks about current Russian state is a form of fascism. And
He means capitalism.
mostly this kind of accusations came from the liberals, from the Western liberals, who use it mostly as the new name of the enemy, which is totally exoticized. So the Russian fascism is the only Russian thing. It came only out of Russian history, Russian society, Russian political tradition, and so on. And also, of course, it used as a name of the enemy as well, in the Cold War manner. So instead of Soviet communism, you have Putin's fascism. And I think it's very much misleading way of talk about fascism. I think I honestly believe that it's very important to talk about Putin's Russia, especially after the start of the invasion, as the new form of fascism. But this,
How are you defining that?
but this definition is justified only if we see current transformation of Russia as a part, let's say, as a vanguard of some global trend that we see in various forms in Western Europe and US and Latin America, in India and so on. So that's why I think it's just to talk about fascism, about modern fascism, not as the kind of special path of Russia, not as the exception, but part of the global trend. The global trend related to the results of the neoliberal transformation of the societies across the globe, also in the various forms, because the, let's say, Russian or broadly post-Soviet path of the neoliberal transformation was, in some sense, much more rapid, much more brutal, much more aggressive than neoliberal transformations in other countries.
Well, okay, so DeKalb says they have totally changed the definition of fascism to suit their agenda. They changed the definition of all words to suit their agenda. This is the thing. It's not just fascism. It's not just whiteness. It's not just white supremacy. It's not just colonialism. It's not just anti-racism. They changed the definition of all words to suit their agenda. What you have to remember is the 4 goals of the woke left are always and forever the same. Gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. They gain power by getting themselves into positions of institutional power or elected positions where they get to make decisions about things. They use that power to make decisions that will fundamentally destabilize the system. What I mean when I say destabilize the system is they cause problems that cause people pain. When they cause problems that cause people pain, they attack capitalism, which is they say, you know what's the reason that you're having all this pain, all this inflation, all this bad economy? Do you know what's causing all of this? Capitalism. Capitalism is the problem. And once they attack capitalism and they start to stir doubt in capitalism, because when people are in pain, they look for something to blame for that pain, they usher in their Marxist utopia by saying, how about Marxism? How about we replace capitalism with Marxism? So you have to memorize this, guys. If you are new to Socialism Saturday and you learn nothing else from this stream, you have got to memorize this list of goals. Gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. Every single definition that they change words to will go directly back to those 4 goals. okay? Every single time they redefine a word, it's because they're trying to gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. Every single time. And you always have to keep that in mind. Every single thing they do is for one or more of those goals. It is never for what they say it is, because socialists always lie. They always lie. Do not believe a single thing they say. They are always lying to you to gain power over you so they can destabilize the system, so they can attack capitalism, so they can usher in their Marxist utopia.
What I think is important to revise in our let's say theoretical baggage of the series of fascism. Basically, if you look at the vast majority of the series of fascism, you can find, I mean, not only Marxist theories, but generally in historiography and so on, you can find like three main lines of conceptualization of fascism. Of course, I'm a bit simplifying, but that is exactly what is needed now. So the first line is the point that the fascism is a type of ideology, that fascism is based on some set of ideological characteristics. And from this point of view, which is basically remain to be dominant in the historical studies on fascism, you can see the exact desire to find the ideal type of fascism. That is, for example, what is Roger Griffin, the famous historian of fascism, is promoting. The main problem of this approach is that it's very hard to reconstruct the intellectual legacies, the intellectual continuity of fascism. Even if you look to the historical fascism, let's say the fascism of the mid 20th century, you can say how contradictory and eclectic was the fascist movements in the various countries. Yeah, just Alberta gave an example of the rhetorics of the early Mussolini that was changed to the other type of more statist rhetoric to the late 20s. The Mussolini regime in the late 30s somehow adopted the racist rhetoric that was not typical for this regime at the beginning, and so on and so forth. You can find a lot of examples of such eclectism and, let's say, incoherency of the fascism as the idea. There is no idea of fascism because even in its rhetorics, fascism in various countries always always present itself as the revolt against theory. Yeah, so it's a famous phrase of Mussolini that the theory is a prison. So we should break this prison and we should rely on a pure life. So the life is the main source of our political energy. So the second approach is the idea that the fascism is the mass movement. And this idea in some sense is kind of justified, because definitely in the 20s and 30s there were mass fascist movements, but not all of these fascist movements came to power, and the reason why some of these fascist movements, despite that they were quite massive, didn't came to power, because there was no collective will of the elite.
Tayton says, This must be the radical history they want. Guys, radical history is code for far left history. It's a far left interpretation of history with political bias. But anytime you hear someone say the term radical, unless they're like a surfer or like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, most often that person will be a socialist. I know this guy's a little hard to understand, guys. We're going to work our way through it. We're going to listen to what he has to say. And then once they get to the audience Q&A, I bet you we're going to get some really good golden nuggets, but we got to work our way through it. It's just the way it goes. Welcome to Socialism Saturday. This is your training ground. If you want to sit through 3 days of socialism like I did at the Socialism Conference, this is quite literally from the Socialism Conference that I went to. This is the type of stuff I was sitting through for 3 days, because if you want to infiltrate socialist events, you got to learn to sit through this stuff, because if you sit through it, they're going to say something eventually.
Leads of the bourgeois state to allow this movement to come to power.
Bourgeois, private property owner.
That's why I believe that Karl Polanyi, who was already mentioned by Alberto, was absolutely right when he defined the fascism not as the movement, but as a move of the elites, of the traditional elites of the state bureaucracy, and of course big capital, which allow the fascists to come to power in order to transform their political regime. So that's why I believe that the third approach, the approach which
Rottweiler coming through with the tidbit as always. Rottweiler says, radical history comes from Marcuse. Repressive tolerance, movements from the left can be as violent as they want, and movements from the right can't. Well, the right is also lazy and only threatens violence when in fact they're going to sit on their lazy boy and watch the football game. But thank you, Rottweiler. As always, your contributions are invaluable.
Define fascism as a type of regime, so which believe that the fascism as the fascist rule is like the most important element of the understanding what the fascism is. I think that this approach is quite relevant for today. That's why we should treat the current Russian regime as a kind of laboratory of life, so we can see now how this kind of transformation of the political regime into new form of fascism could be established. So, how much time?
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Five more minutes.
So then I will briefly give you an explanation what happened in Russia in 5 minutes. So basically, it's interesting that from the beginning, the Putin's regime and Putin himself was not ideological regime. You can say that it was post-political in the sense how Jacques Rentier used this term. It was cynical. It was based on the neoliberal rationality. And it was based on that, the most important feature of fascism, on the mass depolitization of the population. So, in fact, that is the main element of fascism, that the people became not really mobilized, not became politicized, but became more and more alienated of politics. And this alienation also could take a form of some kind of passive aesthetic consumption of political spectacle. And that was exactly called by Walter Benjamin the fascist aesthetization of politics. So aesthetization of politics is something opposite to the real politicization of the society. And during these 20 years, you saw in Russia how systematically all the let's say institutions like political institutions, civil institutions, which had some kind of relative autonomy, how they were systematically eliminated and destroyed. So, in fact, during all these years of Putin's rule, there was also, borrowing Polanyi term, a kind of the double movement. So it was the movement of this depolitization from the top, this expansion of the power of the elite, and at the same time there were kind of counter movements, the movements of protests, the labor movement, various type of environment movement, and so on and so forth. So let's say what we can call the active society, the society that somehow confront itself to the power of the state. And from the various imperialist, expansionist adventures of the Russian state, starting from the Chechen wars. You know that the Putin came to power as the person who united the nation in the times of the Chechen war, and in that moment he was a big friend of George W. Bush, and the Chechen war, the Second Chechen War, was presented as a part of the global crusade against Islamic terrorism. So Russia was a part of this crusade, and Putin used it as the way to oppress the society and to strengthen his power over society. And that kind of imperialist adventures were always a kind of answer to the activization of the protest movement, activization of the society. So in this sense, you can say that it was a kind of preventive revolution. And you know that the Putin's regime is absolutely obsessed of revolution. So according to the current Russian ideology, revolutions always present a type of conspiracy coming from abroad, of course, starting from the 1917, then through Maidan, Arab Spring, and everything you can name it.
I'm so desperate
So
for him
I
to stop
believe
talking. It's
that
not even funny.
the start of the full-scale invasion was a kind of the final moment, final step in this fascization of the Russian state from the top. And for now, after the beginning of the invasion, you can see how Russia finally transformed in the full-scale fascist dictatorship, which actually used the rhetorics, use the language, which mostly repeat, of course, on a different level, the same tropes, the same figures that you can listen from every type of the far right in every country. So it's the same kind of traditional family, it's the same idea of cultural pessimism, so the struggle against some kind of degeneration, degradation of the society. It's idea of making Russia great again, of course.
Hang on, got a super chat coming in. Hang on. Do I have a Discord? I do have a Discord. It is a supporter-only Discord. And if you're signed up as a supporter on my Substack, as a channel member on this YouTube channel, on my locals, or on my Patreon, I will be sending out a link to the supporter Discord for tomorrow night, because we do movie nights every Sunday night in my supporter Discord at 8 p.m. Tomorrow we're watching Bubble Boy. It's Murphy Pool's pick. Murphy Pool, of course, is the hero of the Socialism Conference, because I probably wouldn't have gotten into it without him. But it's a supporter-only Discord, so you got to sign up as a supporter on one of those. I would recommend the Substack, and I will be sending out the link to join the Discord tomorrow in the afternoon sometime. Thank you for asking. Sandy, if you've been lost, it's okay. I'm lost too. I have no idea what he's talking about. But he's about to wrap up, and we're about to get into Q&A, and so that'll be good.
and it's brutal, not just nationalism, but anti-universalism. That there is no such thing as humanity, there is no such thing as society. They're just individuals, they're just countries who are struggling for their power, for their domination. That's how is life is organized, and that is how the situation on the globe is organized. So in this way, you can see the direct link in between the neoliberal individual.
Oh, this is so he's trying to say that Russia didn't have real socialism because they still had the biological nuclear family. For those who don't know, if you're new to socialism, our favorite concept in socialism is abolish the family because it is the most dystopian of the dystopian. And socialists really do want to abolish the biological nuclear family. They are not sly about it. They say it right out in the open. I'm going to have something going up on the Substack tomorrow or Monday, depending on that demonstrates this explicitly. But we've also watched extensive abolish the family stuff on the channel. So if you just search for abolish the family on my channel, you're going to come up with a whole watch list. And the reason they want to abolish the okay, well, let's do this as a pop quiz. Why do you think that socialists want to abolish the biological nuclear family? Go ahead, chat in your answers. If you're wrong, it's okay. No harm, no foul. But why do you think that socialists want to abolish the biological nuclear family? And I know there's a little bit of a delay in the chat, so I'm just going to remind everyone, please mount the like button for me. Mounting the like button allows YouTube to know to recommend our stream to more friends, and so more people can come and join us. And yes, we've got some right answers. Exactly. Socialists want to abolish the biological nuclear family because the biological nuclear family upholds capitalism. It upholds capitalism. Exactly. It upholds capitalism. Exactly, exactly, exactly. Well done, guys. Well done.
Thinking and the current, let's say, new fascist ideology of the Russian state. So the last point would be, how to fight against it. And I think that this fight should start from the reflection of what is really going on and how we should be real internationalists, how we should see the situation on the globe, not in the framework of this anti-universalist struggle in between the various, great powers for their domination. How we can reconstruct the society, the humanity as the force confronted to the logic of market, the logic of capitalism, which is destroying the planet and which is destroying the society as a whole. So probably I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now they're going to do stack. They're going to do progressive stack.
Thank you both so much for that. For the people standing at the back, there's quite a few seats down the front here. If anybody actually wants to take a seat, feel free to come find one. There are some right at the front over here. We won't bite. Okay, I'm going to open it up for discussion. So as I said before, if you can raise your hand if you want to speak, and I will call on you. And as I call on you, if people can come and form a line. I realize I keep saying queue, and none of you know what that means.
Hang on, we got a super chat from Steven. Thank you, Steven, for the super chat. Abolishing the family gives private care to the state, thus destabilize. Well, it wouldn't be private, though. It would be public. Because remember, if they abolish the family, it's about abolishing private property because they view children to be the property of their biological family. So abolishing the family gives care to the state, which would be public, thus destabilizing capitalism. Looking forward to your Substack article. Keep up the hard work. And Posobiec is vile for stealing your work. Well, you know what's funny, Steven, is after I started talking about Jack Posobiec stealing my journalism, I started getting DMs on Twitter from people who are like, guess what? Jack Posobiec stole my work too and claimed it was his own. And these are like real journalists. These are like real investigative journalists that were like, you're not the only one whose work he's stolen. Keep speaking up about it. You're not the only one. And I was like, oh, that's just great. And of course, I knew I wasn't the only one. If you're going to steal if you're going to steal one person's journalism, you're going to steal other people's journalism. So fuck Jack Posobiec.
That's a British word. Sorry, I mean form a line behind the microphone so that we can keep things moving.
Well,
and also I'm going to abuse.
Shit, Bot, this is actually funny. This is funny. Bot says, Carlin, since you were non-binary at the conference, you could have gotten away with using the men's bathroom. Check this out. They made, in the conference center, they made all bathrooms gender neutral. So they basically took what used to be a men's room and made it gender neutral without changing anything on the inside. They took a women's room, made it all gender neutral. Everyone could go in any bathroom. And I got to tell you, first of all, there was a time when, so there were basically like two bathroom doors right next to each other where like one used to be the men's room and one used to be the women's room, and you don't know which is which because they replaced the signs with like a gender neutral bathroom sign. And like I walked into the men's room and I saw a roll of urinals and I was like, nope. And I walked right back out. It was like, I was like, not today, Satan. No. I'm not going to the bathroom with a row full of goddamn urinals. No, that's not happening. So I walked right back out and walked into the women's room. But I'll tell you what, it was weird because men would come into like it was like I would come out of the stall in the women's room and see like men standing there, and I was like, it was weird. And I've been in gender neutral bathrooms before where they basically have like a men's area on one side and a women's area on the other, but it's like one big room. So you're kind of separated and then you just use the same sinks. And that's still weird, but it's like a little bit more tenable. This was literally just, it was a women's freaking bathroom that they put a gender neutral sign on. And so men were like walking in and out. And I was like, yo. Blue Nomad, thank you for the super chat. I'm watching at ×2 speed to catch up. It makes Carlin look like she has knit 5 sweaters and can drink like a sailor. Well, I can certainly drink like a sailor. Thank you. I appreciate the super chat.
It's my position to just ask a couple of questions of my own for you to think on first. The first one was picking up on your point at the very end, Ilya, about fascism being, not really thinking of fascism as primarily an ideological force, but as you have both talked about, as a kind of regime or as a process. And I guess I'm curious about how you see what seems to be relatively consensus across the different fascism at the moment is this particular obsession with gender, right? With trans people, with reproductive rights, with nuclear family. And I know, Alberto, you've got some about this in the book, but I wonder if you could touch a bit more on that, and kind of why we see the issue of gender in this moment in particular, including in Russia. And the second one is to throw out, Alberto, you mentioned in your talk about Aimé Césaire and his idea of fascism being kind of colonialism coming home, and this idea of fascism as a kind of boomerang back into
colonialism also
Western
means
Europe.
capitalism.
And I was at the book launch for Arun Kundnani's What is Anti-Racism recently, and he threw out that you can think about fascism today, particularly in the US, in the same way, and that he basically sees Trump and the kind of...
Oh, really? Oh, really? Oh, really? So she's talking about a guy. What she's saying is that she recently went to a book launch for a book called What is Anti-Racism? We watched that event on this channel for Socialism Saturday. Do you know what the definition of anti-racism was in the way that she said it? Anti-racism means anti-capitalism. It was literally the thumbnail that they used for the book launch. Anti-racism means anti-capitalism. So when she's saying that Trump is like, and she basically said that like she was comparing it to fascism in the United States. So that when she says that Trump is a symbol of fascism, what she means is that Trump is a capitalist.
movements around him as the boomerang of the Iraq War, the wars in the Middle East, and kind of those wars coming back home. So a new kind of, I guess, imperialism coming home, as you maybe touched on. I wondered what you think of that.
Yes, they believe that the biological nuclear family is fascism because the biological nuclear family upholds capitalism. Hang on. No, we don't play this game. They are allowed to participate in capitalism because they live in a capitalist society and they have to survive within the means of capitalism. This is not an own to socialist guys saying the people on the right have got to stop doing this. I like, and I'll quickly correct anyone that does this on Socialism Saturday because it's a poor own. It literally says in the Communist Manifesto that these people are allowed to engage in capitalism because they live in a capitalist society. They have to survive in capitalism, so they are allowed to engage in capitalism. Don't tell people, oh yeah, why are you doing capitalism? Because it's going to sound stupid to them. It really does. Nope, they are not midwits. No, they're not. They're very smart and they're kicking your ass.
It was really an interesting observation. Anyway, that's all from me. Hands up and I will call you. So here in the blue check at the back with the white t-shirt. Yeah, you. In the red in the middle. Yeah, from the middle down here. And yeah, in the brown cap, if you could form a line behind the microphone, that'd be great.
Yeah, thanks for kicking off just a really high-level discussion. I wanted to start, Ilya, you talked about this conceptualizing of fascism not as the...
Okay, so what you're about to see, because this is going to be confusing to people, what they're going to do is they're going to let all of the people in line speak. The panelists are not necessarily going to respond to the people until they're done. Every single person is done speaking. So what's going to happen is you guys are going to see some people are going to ask them questions. Some people are going to make statements. If you see a person ask a question at the microphone and they don't answer it right away, it's not that they're ignoring it. It's not that they're going to not answer it. It's that they have to wait for all the people in line to be done and then they answer everyone at once.
Movement, but as the move of the ruling class toward allowing fascism to take power. And I want to ask, I guess, a question about either definitionally or in terms of the world today, what the relationship of capital is to fascism. Just sort of, coming out of it seems to me that this is a real question that we need to grapple, coming out of the Trotskyist tradition, coming out of, you read Arendt on the origins of totalitarianism. There's some kind of conception that fascism is a force which is external to the ruling class, which capital has to sort of like fight or not really want until then there's a moment where it has to turn to it, right?
Bro, people like you are why the socialists are winning. Because you are underestimating them. You are the one that are allowing them to win. They are not stupid. They are not midwits. You're not smarter than them because they're kicking your fucking ass. So you're getting your ass kicked by midwits according to you. What does that make you? If they're midwits and they're kicking your ass up and down the playing field, then that must make you really fucking dumb.
And I don't know, it seems to me that there's a wide spectrum of relationships between capital and fascism that are present in the world today. I'll take two examples, which I take to be some kind, maybe the poles of this. On the one hand, you have the Modi regime in India, which has very much embraced the sort of Mussolini ethos that you brought up, Alberto, of neoliberalization, and has in this way just completely ingratiated the ruling class, it seems, to the new government. And then with the counterexample being the fascist movement in Israel.
So if you're getting your ass kicked by a bunch of midwits, then you must be a straight up fucking retard. Thank you for announcing yourself. It's really good to know who the retards are in the chat that we should definitely not listen to. Because, I mean, if you're losing to a whole group of midwits, that means you're really fucking dumb, bro. Stop underestimating them. They're kicking your ass for a reason. And they're kicking your ass because you sit there and underestimate them and then, okay, well, now you're going to get a little timeout because you're not fucking listening. You can sit in your timeout for 5 minutes and you can think about that because I'm not going to allow this. Do not underestimate these people.
Israel, which has done the exact opposite, which has managed to completely piss off Israeli capital to the point where, you know, mass amounts of currency are being taken out of the country and moved elsewhere. You have, you know, this general strike, which tried to prevent the sort of judicial coup happening, which wasn't really so much a general strike as it was as a general shutdown of the economy by the bosses, right? High tech in Israel being really central to this. And then around the world, you see all kinds of different iterations of this. You know, in Brazil, it's very much divided along sectors of capital. In the United States, you have, you know, right after January 6th, you have you know, many dozens, maybe hundreds of companies stopping donations to the Republican Party, and of course, all of those have resumed. But to try and whatever, you see capital trying to discipline and relate to the fascist movement in different ways. What seems to me to be the case is that there is no, in none of these cases is.
But what he's saying is he is directly he's basically saying that fascism cannot exist without capitalism, because he hasn't kind of like wrapped his head around around the code that they're using. But yeah, he's basically saying that fascism and capitalism are like inseparable. He's making the point that we've been making throughout the entire stream.
Can we say the capital itself is the force, right? Is the fascist power? And that's what I worry about, Alberto, with the when we start talking about you know, states becoming fascism, which haven't announced them in any kind of way as this movement. It seems to be the case that there's some crucial piece of this, which is about the relation of capital to a social force which is external to it. So I wonder if y'all can talk about that, and also folks from the floor.
Oh, hi. I'm Linda Mann from Ukraine Social Solidarity Campaign. And
Ukraine Social Solidarity Campaign.
My name is Linda Mann from the Ukraine Socialist Solidarity
They had a table.
Campaign.
I have their literature.
And I'm kind of picking up from where he left off, is that we have a lot of, ever since we first started becoming more aware of fascism as a problem, like in the mid, you know, like 2015, 2016, there was a real problem with trying to get people to believe that there was an actual fascist threat, because it didn't meet some definition that they had. And I thought of the idea.
What she just said. So Suzanne, who runs the Ukraine Solidarity Fund, they had a whole table at the Socialism Conference. Suzanne thinks that fascism started to rear its ugly head in the United States again around 2015 and 2016, when Donald Trump was running for president. And Suzanne is very confused about why people don't understand that fascism has a definition, because Suzanne says that people were confused because the rising fascism in the United States in 2015 and 2016 didn't meet the traditional definition of fascism. And she's just really confused about why people couldn't see there weren't all sorts of other definitions of fascism. Here, I'll play that back again. That show's funny.
Is that aware of fascism as a problem, like in the mid, you know, like 2015, 2016, there was a real problem with trying to get people to believe that there was an actual fascist threat, because it didn't meet some definition that they had. And
it was really hard to get people to believe that Donald Trump was a fascist, because Donald Trump didn't meet the definition of fascism. That's funny.
I thought of the idea not of preventive counter-revolution, but that's what I was. I mean, I didn't use that term, but it seemed to me that the ruling class was beginning to see.
Hang on. So your best friend asks, what is the reason for the Q&A being a string of questions and answers and comments at the end versus a typical Q&A? I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to involve more of the audience in a discussion, and they're trying to like just give the audience, and it's just like when they answer all the questions, sometimes they answer multiple questions at once. It is actually kind of an interesting way to do it. I actually came to like it at the end. So if someone is asking, like, they're trying to identify themes that are coming up. And so if they see a theme in the questions that are coming up, they'll answer them kind of all at once. So it does, and remember, again, these people are collectivists. They're not individualists. They're collectivists. So their concern is going to be about creating the best collectivist environment, and so being as participatory as possible with how they're taking questions.
that it might need to rely on fascism in the future. It was anticipating, problems, crises with its system, more militancy or something. But it was moving instead of waiting for the crisis to happen. It was acting preemptively. But then we've also had a debate in our organization over whether or not Russia is actually fascist because Putin doesn't seem to want to rely on mass fascist movements. No ruling class wants to mobilize the masses, but in fascism that becomes a necessity. And we're not really sure if Putin has even now mobilized the fascists in Russia, or become a true, fascist state. And that was it's a really vexing problem because people who don't know what fascism is or can't identify the threat.
What is fascism?
They're really taken in by this. Well, Ukraine is a fascist country, or baloney like that. I mean, they can become even more confused and end up supporting.
How many hours a day was this conference? I went to like 5 sessions a day, 4 or 5 sessions a day. So I got there usually around like 10 o'clock and I wouldn't leave until probably 6 o'clock because I didn't go to the keynotes in person. So there was an additional keynote after I left. So they would have probably 5 or 6 sessions in a day. I just didn't go to the last one because they were streaming it. So I watched it from my hotel, but it was a lot. It was a lot.
The fascist groups that are supported by Russia. And anyway, I don't really have a single question, but I'm
gonna be honest. I didn't drink. I couldn't drink, but I may have had a little cannabis drink powder that I put in my bottled water. I may have. I'm not confirming or denying, but maybe part of the way that I got through listening to 5 presentations a day is they make little cannabis flavor water packets, maybe that come in a nice pink lemonade flavor that relax you and allow you to chill out. And I may have had some of those packets in my bottled water I'm not confirming, but I may have had that.
That to me seems to be the biggest difference now than these crises during the interwar period where all these groups emerged and announced themselves. Thanks.
Yeah, it's totally fine not to have a question. This is not an academic conference. It's totally fine just to have an opinion and come up and say it. We very much encourage that.
Yes, thank you, because mine is a question and it's something of a reflection, and I really thank the panelists. Firstly, my name is Shomi. I'm a part of Left Voice. I'm originally from India, where the discussion of the far right is incredibly prescient, particularly with the Modi regime. That's not just the BJP, but also with the RSS, which is a neo-fascist organization, with the BJP being its political arm. But I think I really do want to thank the panelists, especially in terms of presenting this discussion of fascism, of the role that it plays of advancing a particular agenda for capital, right? Which in the 1920s that it did so as a reaction to the failures of of revolution in Italy and Germany, and the masses that were clamoring for revolution became the social force for fascism just in a decade. And for me, especially as these questions keep coming back, and even through the presentation, one of the things that I keep going back to is what Gramsci talks about, the organic crisis of the discussion of the old is dying and the new cannot be born, and now's the time of morbid symptoms, and in that sense of thinking about the rise of the far right in particular as also an expression of those morbid symptoms, right? And to think about the parallels that we see right now, especially with the rise of the far right, across the globe.
Wizard, I can't help but notice that you're continuing to do what I asked you not to do, which is clearly breaking rule number 2 of my chat. And so if you continue to do what I told you not to do and what I've already put you in a timeout for once, you're not going to last in this chat very long, buddy. It is entirely up to you. Cut the bullshit.
I think it's worth thinking about like all of those morbid symptoms now, and some of the panelists did talk about it, which I think is really important and for us to think about. Like we are like living in the midst of like this huge crisis of neoliberalism, right? Like especially like, we are the generations of like 2 economic crises.
All right.
But also like we've seen like,
I just want to point out, Wizard was warned, Wizard was put in a timeout, Wizard was warned again, and Wizard is still whining, so now Wizard is gone. I do not fuck around with my rules of the chat. If you continue to whine after I have told you to stop doing what I asked you to stop doing, then you are going to get banned and you will not be welcome back. Goodbye, Wizard. Have a nice life.
Huge populist movements that were completely defeated or channeled into neo-reformist formations, like, I don't know, like Syriza in Greece, in Podemos in Spain, that became a part of the regime that contained the expectations of the masses who rose up, like, in the indignados against austerity and all of that, and were met with the power of the state, right? Like, Syriza ended up being the arbiters of austerity in Greece, as did, and Podemos became junior partners to the PSOE government in Spain, and led the working class nowhere. But I also think that we're also living in a really inspiring time because we're seeing the working class rise up too, right? Like, and in that sense, I think this question of morbid symptoms is no way resolved yet for us. And if the working class, was defeated in the in the 20s in revolution, I think for us, like, all of that is yet to be written in many ways. Like we see it being incipient. Like,
Amazon Eve, you have been around for a while. You know what the rules of my chat are. They're very clear. I have given you a lot of liberties in this chat where you've said things that I think are pretty fucking offensive, if I'm honest about it. But I've let you say them anyway. If you're going to bitch and complain about my rules, you won't be here for very long. You're well aware of what they are. They have been the same rules for years now. And so, guys, let me just make this very clear. This is my house. These are my rules. The rules exist for a reason. They exist so that people aren't shitposting up and down the chat all the time. If you don't like the rules, you don't have to be here. You can go and find all the other people on the internet who are doing the same content as me. Oh, wait, there aren't any. So if you don't like it, go somewhere else, or you can learn socialism on your own. It is entirely up to you. But while you are in my house, you will follow my rules.
Incipient class struggle, in France, in Peru, all across the world, but even in new unionizations and the return of the rank and file worker here in the US, who's not just fighting for better unions, but is fighting against racism, against sexism, against transphobia. And for us, I think, especially to tackle this question of the far right, against all of the pressures of lesser evilism, I feel like it's an existential task of the left and as socialists who are here in a conference to get together and to think of how do we organize ourselves, as our class, as a political force that can meet the challenge. Challenge, because it really does feel very much like Rosa talks about, it's either socialism or barbarism, right? So yeah, I just wanted to leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you.
Reagan is asking a question in the chat. What is the age range of people at the conference? It was all over the place. It was really, there were people all the way from college age all the way up to people in their 80s. So it really was a very wide age range at the conference. But also keep in mind, there were different types of socialists at the conference. There were the socialists that became socialists in the 60s and 70s, anti-war hippies. And then there were the socialists that became socialists in the 90s and the 2000s, who are much more revolutionary, Antifa style socialists. And those two groups are very, very different. They might fundamentally kind of revolve. They might kind of have the same ideas, but they are very, very different.
Hello, my name is Hanna. I'm originally from Ukraine, and thanks a lot for this discussion. I think it is very important. I wanted to ask you a thing about the definitions of fascism. I had a chance to give a seminar to my students this year about different conceptions of fascism, the historical fascism, but also the anti-fascist struggles. And our final lesson was about, I was presenting the current polemics in the media and in the academia about can we talk about current Russian state as a fascist state? And there are very different positions on it. And I came to the conclusion that the type of theory we use to define what fascism is a political choice in itself. And many authors there explicitly or implicitly recognizing it. For example, Marlène Laruelle, who wrote a book, Is Russia Fascist? And her response that...
Yes, this is correct, Sean. And this is actually, you described my father-in-law, who is currently in the Ukraine right now. Many of the older generation, and he's ethnically Russian. He's from like the Russian-speaking part of Ukraine. Many of the older generations of Russians miss communism because they suffered after the collapse. The sudden change to an open market left many on the streets and unable to adapt. That is very, very correct.
No, Russia is not fascist. He gave all this theory about why, how, what kind of characteristics we do not find in Russia, and so we cannot talk about fascism in Russia. But at the end, she says, I do not think we need to treat the Russian regime as fascist, because if we use the word fascist, that means the enemy, and it means we cannot do any negotiations with Russia. And me as a person, I am for the negotiations with Russia. And you, for example, Lilia, you wrote an article that I admire a lot, and it's very interesting, very stimulating. And in the end, you have a political stance. You said, I define the Russian state as fascist because I want to show this is a part of a global tendency. And for us, as for the left, we need to reflect on that. What is fascism globally? So is there any
Well,
way...
I mean, let's think about what this person just said for a second, because she said, if you define something as fascist, there can be no negotiation with it. Now, let's take that in context with they have said several times throughout this presentation that fascism and capitalism are inextricably linked, right? So what does that mean, that they think there can be no negotiation with capitalism? That's how you lead to a revolution.
Way to define fashion without actually, being ancré, I don't know how to say, to being determined by our political choice, actually. So, yeah, this is my question. I hope it was clear enough. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ivan. I'm from Vancouver, another Vancouverite. I have two maybe conceptual questions, one kind of for each of you. One is something missing from a conception of fascism from Alberto is that fascism responds to a threat to the stability of capitalism from a socialist revolution. Historically, this has been generally the case. Of course, it's not a fixed thing. But what is I think
said it again.
The character of the threat faced by capitalism forms the conditions of that fascist movement or fascist move.
The characteristic of the threat faced by capitalism forms the character of the fascistic movement. They just keep saying it out loud over and over and over again. Who's going to run their utopia? Well, they think it's going to be them. They think that they're going to take over the government in their utopia and they're going to do socialism right this time. What they don't realize is that they're going to be put against the wall.
And so I think we can see the bourgeoisie in the United States, for example, flirting with fascist movements and then punishing them when they don't carry off their task or need them any longer with these incredible sentences to the Proud Boys members that were received this week that I think are the left should actually see as a threat, not only the far right, these kinds of punishment for political action.
Isn't that interesting?
But the other question is,
isn't that interesting that someone at the Socialism Conference says, hey guys, maybe we should all be a little concerned about the massive prison sentences that the Proud Boys received for political activism. Maybe we should be overlooking the fact that they're right-wing fascists and pay attention to the fact that they got a 20-year prison sentence for political action. Isn't that funny and interesting? He's smart. They're probably going to ignore that part of what he's saying, but that was smart.
is about Russia. I think I've had a hard time conceptualizing Russia as imperialist because it doesn't meet some of the economic considerations for imperialism being the driver for its invasion of Ukraine. And so thank you for the discussion of Russia as fascist. I think it's quite interesting. I think that the sort of ideological or invasion project of invading Ukraine for fascist reasons makes more sense than for kind of classical imperialist ones. But the mass base piece is missing. That because a fascist state has to move kind of in tandem with its brown shirts or black shirts. And so maybe Wagner Group is a sort of a hired proxy for this movement, something that can be facilitated that way. But so I'm interested in those thoughts. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, if I can see, do you want to respond first and then we'll do another round? Yeah, sure. Okay, you guys do some responses and then we can go again.
Thank you so much for this great and very detailed questions. So first to the question of homophobia and let's say the politics of body, like in general in Russia, of course it plays a crucial role. I mean, if you look at the Putin's rhetorics, it's in every speech. You have this idea of degradation, of the purification, the need to purify the Russian nation, and it's not just rhetorics. So I don't know if you're familiar with the recent Russian laws that, for example, criminalize any public presence of a person as the LGBT. So if you, I don't know, wear LGBT flag, you will be arrested. It's a crime. So the transgender transit is officially forbidden in Russia, like at all. You can't make it. And there are a few other things which definitely like point out that this question is one of the key like questions for the regime. I think that okay, there are like different let's say ideological elements in it. Of course, there is a populist, let's say, element in it. How to find the unity of the nation, of course, behind the hatred to the LGBT. That's a good ground for the national unity. But I think that behind all these kind of things, you see much more deeper, let's say, neoliberal managerial concern about the people as the source. Yes, so the people is a kind of economic need, and you have people to reproduce themselves, and if they don't reproduce themselves, that creates a problem for the state. So that is the main concern behind it, and it lies in a very deep, let's say, neoliberal managerial understanding of the society, which turn open fascist forms. And I think that is a good example of this interrelation between the modern fascism and neoliberal condition. Then there are a few questions about mobilization, that you have no mass movements. So the first thing is for what reason these mass movements are needed. They were needed in the first half of the 20th century to confront the rising labor movement. For now, you have the situation of mass destruction of the labor movement globally. And of course, the post-Soviet states and Russia especially are the most damaged in this sense. But the other thing is also much more deeper. We just discussed it with Alberto before, that the fascist societies, the societies that already live under the fascist regime, they are not mobilized in the sense that the people are politically active all the time, that they are engaged, that they are marching all the time. So in fact, if you cover the history of the German society, in the 30s, you can find that this society was very much passive. And the way of their engagement, the fascist engagement, was mostly in reporting on their neighbors, on the other people, and so on. And that is the way this kind of vigilance, so that is the way of fascist mobilization, and that you have a lot in Russia now. And I can give a lot of examples for this, how this kind of fascist society is developing, but I have not the time for this. Then very important question about the objective definition of fascism. So I don't want to defend Marlene Laurel, but she wrote her book before the invasion, so it was published in 2021. Probably now she changed a bit her mind. Anyway, I find her explanations quite weak. But I think the problem is not just her political orientation, but the problem is also that she totally relying on Griffin's kind of ideal type of fascism, as the most of the scholars who discuss. And for example, you have Timothy Snyder, who argued that Russia is fascist, also relying on the definition of Roger Griffin. So it's a kind of battle of different interpretations of the same of the same thing. And honestly, I don't think that you can have any objective definition of fascism or of capitalism or of neoliberalism.
I don't think you can have any objective definition of fascism or capitalism or neoliberalism. How do you like that? I don't think you can have any objective definition of fascism or capitalism or neoliberalism. What's he going to say after that?
It's very much dependent on the discursive struggle. So it's
the definition of fascism, capitalism, and neoliberalism depend on the discourse, depend on the struggle. The struggle is another term that they use for destabilizing the system. So when I said the 4 goals of the woke left are gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia, struggle, if you hear someone use the word struggle over and over and over again, they are a socialist. I cannot tell you how many times I heard them say the word struggle over the 3 days I was at the conference. Like, that's what they called their fight. That's what they called their political activism. They call it a struggle. And so this guy has just said that the definition of fascism or capitalism or liberalism depend very much on the discourse or the struggle that they're in at the time. See, we waited an hour and 20 minutes into the presentation to get that golden nugget. This is why socialism is hard to sit through. But it's always worth it. When we hit on the golden nugget, that's when we hit it. Whatever, exactly, Joe. Whatever serves their purpose. The definition will be whatever serves their purpose to gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. He just admits that the truth is a tool to move forward their agenda, and their agenda is the socialist revolution.
Field of discursive.
Let's just listen to that again, because that was important.
Honestly, I don't think that you can have any objective definition of fascism or of capitalism or of neoliberalism. It's very much dependent on the discursive struggle. So it's a field of discursive struggle.
And then the new IKB says, just so everyone knows, struggle in German is Kampf. Oh, so like Mein Kampf, my struggle. It's almost like Hitler was a socialist, isn't it?
In this way, I think that is fine. That you now have various views of the nature of the current Russian state from the different political perspectives, and that creates a field of the battle of these perspectives, which also contribute to our general understanding of the current fascist condition. So maybe just one last minute about the relation of fascist regime and the capital. I think it's a crucial question, and it's also very much related to the idea of the ruling class, because kind of
the ruling class, another term for the ruling class is what? Pop quiz. Another term for the ruling class is what? Anyone have a good idea? Good evening, Jerry. It's good to see you. Welcome. Another term for the ruling class. He just said that the question of fascism and capitalism is directly related to the ruling class. Bougie. Yes. The ruling class is the bourgeois, the capitalist class, the property owning class, the landlord, the business owner, the CEO, the bourgeoisie, the capitalists. Exactly. Well done. Well done. Rosalind from Adelaide is in the chat. Everyone say good day to Rosalind when her super chat inevitably comes up in my chat. So I can just, there it is. Rosalind said, really informative session today. How goes the knitting? I'm working on the What the Fade shawl, Rosalind. And I've just gotten to the garter section, and it's actually coming out pretty good. It's going to be a good shawl, man. I'll tell you what. We're going to go from dark to light, and then we're going to go light back to dark again. It's going to be really, really pretty. Bougie Boogaloo. Oh my god, I should make a t-shirt called with Bougie Boogaloo on it. That'd be pretty great.
Mostly widespread idea of the ruling class is that you have the bourgeois state and you have a bourgeoisie as the kind of independent force which use or even command this state as the kind of how it was called in Marx, the committee, the managerial committee of the
managerial committee.
Sorry. Executive committee, yeah, thank you. So I think that this kind of situation was already passed in the beginning of the 20th century when Lenin wrote his piece on imperialism, because and that is to the question of imperialism as well, because I think that the most important element in Lenin's analysis is that the imperialism is the new historical situation where the relations between the state and capital changed. Yeah, and state became something more than just executive committee of the capital. So in this sense, you can say that the fascist state is the state where the big capital directly, force state to do something. You can't say that the Holocaust was an interest of the bourgeoisie of Germany, but the Holocaust.
Guys, I don't mean to sound like a grifter or anything. I just want to tell you that if I get two more people to become members of my Substack today, paying members of my Substack, I will reach a new milestone in Substack. In terms of like revenue that I have to use to infiltrate future conferences. And so if you would like to help me out and become one of the two people that will lead me to hitting the new milestone in Substack, please head over to Carlyn, KARLYN.com. So, excuse me, Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. I just put the link in the chat. And if you want to sign up for $8 a month or $80 a year, I need two more people, just two more. I know a milestone is like a made up thing, and it really is, but it's nice when you're seeing progress, and I really do appreciate all of the new members that have come in the last week or so. You guys are really helping me out, and you're making it possible for me to go to another conference this year, and there is another really big conference I want to go to this year. It's not socialism, but it's actually really, it has to do with education. That's the only hint I can give you. I cannot tell you what it is because that would get like someone would warn them and it would tell them we're coming and then they'd try to prevent us from coming and stuff like that. And I want to bring one other person to it and to get the most coverage as possible. And so if you guys want to help me out, I do reinvest profits from the Substack and going and doing stuff like this. I can't do it without you guys. I'm completely grassroots funded by you. So 2 more members, please. Just 2 more members. And I do appreciate everyone who has already subscribed. Thank you guys for that. I do appreciate it. All right, we have about 15 minutes left to go in this presentation, guys. Way to go for all hanging in this long.
Was operated in the way of the market society. It was operated absolutely according to the capitalist managerial logic in its extreme, form. And that is one important thing, and another is basically in Russia for most of the existence of Putin's regime, you have the destruction of all the political autonomy.
Thank you, Blue Nomad, for becoming a member of the channel. I do appreciate
capital
it.
as the political autonomy of any other social groups. And that doesn't mean that the state became something non-capitalist, or it became, something above capital. I think not only I, but for example, Franz Neumann in his great book Behemoth, he explained that basically you have the situation where the capital somehow merged with the state, and even some individual interests of the capitalist they are sacrificed for the general, let's say, interest of the capitalist state.
Ilya, I don't want to interrupt you mid-thought, yes, but I do want to bring Alberto back so that we maybe have time for a couple more questions. I'm sorry.
Yay, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you, moderator. Ilya was going on a little bit of a rant.
Is this on? Yes. Okay, great. Thanks for the really stimulating and...
Hang on. 2 ladies in the chat ask, can we get some spy streams again soon? I will look around for spy stream material. If anyone else so guys, listen, you can all help me crowdsource spy stream. And I want to thank Jerry for becoming a supporter on the Substack. Thank you, Jerry. I do appreciate it. You guys can all help me crowdsource spy stream. So find a woke online training that they're presenting via Zoom. Send it to me. Send it to activelyunwoke@gmail.com. You can also... Lisa, thank you for subscribing on the Substack. I do appreciate it. Thank you so much. So send it to me, either like DM me on Twitter, send it to activelyunwoke@gmail.com. And if you find a woke training that they're conducting online, we'll spy stream that shit. Even if I have to pay to sign up for it, it can't be like too expensive because I can't be paying hundreds of dollars for every single training. That would add up real quick. But if it's like, something like $20-$30, I would totally pay to spy stream that. So send me the training. Like if you guys find something like that your university is doing, that your library is doing, that some woke organization that you know about is doing, send me that stuff and we'll see what we can do. I will also be on the lookout for spy stream material because it is definitely a favorite on the channel. So I will definitely be on the lookout for that. Thank you.
Sharp question. So yeah, maybe I'll also start with Rosie's point. So why gender now? You could say, of course, and there's a lot of extremely rich research that in some way or another, right? or in multiple different ways at different times, the questions of gender and sexuality, indeed, often and not in the ways that we think they influence fascism, right? Were at the core, at least, of its anchoring in practices of everyday life, let's say, right? And so there's very interesting work, for instance, about the sort of the myth of the repressive character of the Nazi state and the very weird way in which actually a lot of the thinking about fascism as repressive or fascism as hyper.
If I make a shirt with your slogan, I will definitely send you one. Do it. I will I will, and listen, guys, like I keep saying, if you want to go and infiltrate trainings, I would absolutely teach you how to do it. The very first step, and I'm not kidding, you just got to watch Socialism Saturday for a while. If you're going to go and infiltrate trainings, the best thing that you can do is to watch as much socialism content as possible, because that's going to teach you how to speak their language. And I think I make it a little bit more fun to learn it, and I try to break things down and stuff. So watch Socialism Saturday, watch socialism content on your own time if you're extra crazy, because you're going to learn the language. And once you feel really comfortable that you can speak the language, that's when you go in and you can go to their conferences. I mean, you can go without doing it. You can do whatever you want. Like, I don't own you. You can do whatever you want, right? But I think it's going to be much more, it's going to be much safer for you. Although you're black, so you can get away with a little bit more than I can, to be honest about it. It's just the way it goes at socialism events anyway. But it's going to be much safer, and it's going to go much smoother and be much more valuable the more you know how to speak their language, and the more socialism you listen to, the better you're going to be able to speak their language. So I appreciate you wanting to step up, Jerry. Listen, guys, I'm not going to be able to do this socialism conference again. It's way too dangerous for me to go for it now. I shot my shot. I did it. I got a lot of material out of it, but I can't go to this again because I think I'll get my ass beat. And so I'm going to need other people to step up and do this that aren't public people, and I want to train all of you how to do it. The more the merrier. Tayton, congrats to the people that have lasted 3 hours. Yes, congratulations to everyone who's still here. I know it's hard. And Half Orc Fighter, thank you for becoming a member of the channel. I do really appreciate it. Thank you, guys. It was a very diverse audience. It really was. It wasn't just all white people. There were actually a lot of Latino people. There were Native Americans. There were Black people. It was extremely diverse. It really was. Oh, so you know how to speak socialist, Jerry. You know how to speak it. Okay. All right.
For sexualized or eroticized our projections back from the moments in which people are thinking about fascism. One element which I think is significant then and now, albeit in very very unique and particularized ways, is the fact that gender and sex and sexuality allow for the projection or for the articulation of these macro imaginaries, these geopolitical, these civilizational, and these national and nationalist imaginaries onto the most intimate sphere of life, its regulation and its violence, right? So I think that is key, and one might even speculate that the hypertrophy of this dimension as what is allowing. I mean, you can.
I just want to announce that I have reached a new milestone on Substack, and thank you all. I really do appreciate the support, guys. It makes me, I cannot tell you how thrilled that I am that people like this socialism content. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. Thank you guys for the support. Really. Like, I mean, listen, man, if I get to teach people socialism and break this stuff down and that's what I get to do, and like go to conferences and infiltrate conferences, and I get an amazing super sticker from Honest Dog, which is, if you see it, it's like dogs with fireworks. Thank you guys. I really like, capitalism is so fucking great, because it means I get to teach people socialism on the internet, and I get to make a living out of it, and you guys support the work I'm doing. I really, really appreciate it. How many people attended the conference? I think around 400-ish.
Can say that in many ways, actually, this is, amongst other things, the key trope, the key vehicle for a kind of neo-fascist international, right? That's the one thing that brings them all together. Of course, they're completely divergent. National capitalists and other interests might not, but that has been, and you can see it very concretely, like by who the speakers are at these, transphobic cultural suicide conferences in, Hungary or wherever, right? Like that is really operating in a very significant way. And I think in some sense, even people who probably have no particular interest, the very many fascist grifters that operate in our world, have seen that this works, right? Have seen that this works to tie together, to quill together actually very dissimilar political projects with different origins, but that have this as a kind of commonality, right?
I'm going to make a shirt that's based on the I Love New York shirt, except it's going to say I heart capitalism. That's going to be my next shirt.
And almost in inverse proportion to anything that resembles like a social or economic proposal, right? Because like most of these, aside from as people pointed out, vis-a-vis India and elsewhere,
talk to people.
Most of these movements are, at best make some quickly retracted, redistributive, racist noise, but for the most part, they're very much in keeping with the economic and class status quo, right? And so one can't get any intensity out of that. They can't even fake, aside from grotesque anti-Semitic narratives about George Soros or whoever, they can't really simulate even like an anti-cap.
George Soros is not funding these people. I just want to make that very clear for people who might confuse the Malthusians with these people. George Soros is not funding these people. I promise you, he's really not. They don't actually have a lot of money.
Capitalism of fools, right? And so I think this has become even more, like it seems to me it has become even more ratcheted up. I also take the opportunity to thank my fine friend and comrade Jordi Rosenberg, without whom there wouldn't be a chapter on gender in this book. So thanks to him. The question Ilya's already dealt with to some extent, with the very vexed question of the relationship between fascism and contemporary political economy, or fascism and capital. I recently, partly to make up for other lacunae in the book, so to speak, tried to work out, do some work on the debate on fascism that takes place in the context of the emergence of military dictatorships in Latin America amongst the far left, revolutionary far left in Latin America, as they are moving from exile to exile.
They're grassroots funded. They are.
From Chile to Argentina to Uruguay to Mexico and so on and so forth. And there's a very rich debate. In fact, I would think now among the more theoretically sophisticated debates that take place in the 70s on the questions of fascism, largely involving the left of dependency theory, or the revolutionary left of dependency theory, and linked to movements like MIR in Chile and so on and so forth. And one of the things that's very interesting about that debate, especially as it takes place into the 1970s, is the realization that we're talking here in a sense about the use of fascist or fascist-like politics, the realization that these regimes and these political forms, not only do they not need, in fact, do they repel mass mobilization for some of the reasons that Ilya was mentioning vis-a-vis the present, but they, in a sense, always present themselves as transitional, right? They're extremely violent forms of state terror. They involve, of course, all sorts of revanchist ideologies, but they're also more or less explicitly imagine themselves as transitions to a return to a kind of bourgeois status quo, except now all the communists are dead, right? And therefore, you can represent the people because there's no more communists in it, but not because there's an imaginary, some kind of distorted utopia of some other form of organizing society, right? And so I think that the Ecuadorian theorist Agustin Cueva talks about this as a lever and as a kind of accelerant, almost a form of repeated primitive accumulation that requires, and also as a counter-revolutionary force, but that does not have a counter-revolutionary vision, or a kind of non-revolutionary counter-revolution, so to speak, right? Something like that. So I think a lot of the forms of fascism that are more, and theories of fascism that are more useful to think the present with, are the ones in which fascism takes this, let's say, tactical or transitional mediating form, rather than the fascism that we know from at least a certain understanding of Italy and Germany, right? And even, I mean, this is a little bit more speculative, but I think if we follow...
Hang on, I got a super chat coming in from Andre. Carlin is right. They are so serious. They don't like humor or comedy. Even their oh God, it's so true. There was no like... I mean, they would make jokes every now and again. There was one really funny section of one of the education sections when this woman named Bettina Love, who's a professor at Columbia Teachers College, super, super, super woke, but she was talking about how she has twins and they never exposed their twins to TV. They had a very positive, like pro-Black environment until her brother took their kids to see Frozen, and then all of a sudden, like a 90-minute movie, Frozen invaded their house, and she was like, what the hell? And she was really confused about how all their pro-Black upbringing could be undone in the course of like a 90-minute movie. And so like they make jokes every once in a while, but really not that much, if I'm honest about it. You have to like play it straight, man. These people are serious.
Amiri Baraka's suggestion that Black Reconstruction is a theory of fascism, which I think it is. One of the very interesting things that Du Bois does when he's writing about the so-called Compromise of 1877 and the counter-revolution of property is to treat it as a kind of, you could say, as a kind of regionalization of fascism, I mean, literally to the south, and basically the fact that this is a multiple, is geographically and politically like a multi-dimensional counter-revolution of property, in which Northern capital accepts a regime of militia-led racial state terror, or as close as one got to, to even some canonical definition of fascism before fascism, but not as a project, as something that can be contained and regionalized, right? So that I think that also, and that speaks to what I was saying also about the differential experience of fascism, right? I think and this is why I think a kind of a nemesis of thinking with lucidity, but also some degree of strategic horizon about fascism today is anything that involves a theory of totalitarianism, I think is a disaster, precisely because it can only conceive of this as mass mobilization of constantly fanaticized populations in states that need to enter into every nook and cranny in which organize the whole economy. And none of this bears any relationship to the world that we live in. And I think retaining it as a comparator gets us absolutely nowhere. That is not to say that you couldn't envisage moments where these tactical or transitional forms seek to attain greater durability and to experiment with forms of political or economic life that are differently organized. But I think that's the kind of situation that we're in. And I would also just echo what Ilya has already mentioned about depoliticization and demobilization being something that's already very much part even of the DNA of so-called classical fascism. Of course, through the famous obliteration of the so-called left, right? Like the fascist left, the national Bolsheviks, the people who think still this is going to be an anti-capitalist regime, but also in a much more quotidian way.
They
right?
keep saying the quiet part out loud about capitalism.
To say,
the whole way
these
through.
movements can't be thought of as fascist or can't be related to fascism because they're not mass movements of constantly fanaticized populations, to me is kind of a little bit neither here nor there. And just to finish with your other question, Rosie, I haven't read Kunani's book, so I don't know the exact argument.
Well, I'm going to get you a super chat in a second. Thank you.
He gets to that, right? I think so. To this idea of a boomerang, right? I think clearly we have to always, as Ilya was already saying, kind of internationalize these phenomena and think of them in the context both of I guess what long ago Poulantzas would have called the imperialist chain, and also to think about them in terms of geopolitics, but also to think of them in terms of these imaginaries, right? Like the fact that this is a hegemon that knows its precarity, and that precarity is experienced at a very intimate level and at a very disturbing intimate level, and then mediated through masculinity and race and all sorts of other dimensions. But I think the problem with the boomerang in that sense is also the problem of what historical scale and what processes are we looking at, right? So if again if you read something like some of the chapters of Black Reconstruction and have this queasy recognition effect about their disturbing relevance to the present, it's also because there is not just a boomerang of these recent conjunctures of imperialism, but there's also a very longue durée, a much longer history in which these practices of racial terror and class formation and subjectivity kind of play themselves out. Yeah.
Okay, we're at time, as we can tell by the diminishing crowd. So let's call it there.
All right. So that is the end of Socialism Saturday for today. Guys, this was a tough one. If this was not all Socialism Saturdays come with like weird accents and like, German, like in Russian, Italian fascist history. This was a little bit of a tough one, but like where I will say I'm very, very happy is they said over and over and over and over and over and over and over that fascism and capitalism are inextricably linked. And that's important because they have changed the definition of fascism. And I also think the most golden clip of the entire evening was Ilya saying that the definitions of fascism, capitalism, and something else, I forget what it was, would change depending on whatever struggle they're in at the time. So really good job. If this is your first Socialism Saturday, you give yourself a round of applause. You give yourself a pat on the back. This was not an easy one to watch. And I promise most of the things we are going to watch are going to be easier than what we just sat through today. But this is important training ground, guys. You got to learn to sit through the boring. You got to learn to sit through the things you don't understand, because that's how you learn what they actually believe. Rottweiler, thank you for the super chat. Marxists don't like comedy because they know it's a weapon to undermine confidence in their demagogues. Ain't that the truth? Fun fact, the first individual who was executed in Soviet Russia was in fact a street clown. Isn't that interesting? Well, mockery is absolutely a tool that we need to use against the left. They fucking hate it. They cannot understand it. But like when we're doing mockery, guys, we have to do smart mockery. So it's not like we shouldn't just go into like socialist streams and be like, why are you selling your book? Why are you engaging in capitalism? You can't, like, that's not good mockery because their founding documents give them permission to participate in capitalism. But we have to come up with like really smart ways to mock them because they don't know how to handle that. So that's something that people can keep in mind. Steven says, I just paid to subscribe to the cult. Does that still go to the tally? Yes, Stephen, I will put that towards the tally. So thank you so much for a subscription to the cult. And the cult is my other Substack where I post like my daily streams and stuff like that. And you know what, Stephen? I will make sure you have a complimentary subscription over on Actively Unwoke as well, just so you get the benefit of both. So thank you for that. Thank you for that subscription as well. I really do appreciate it. And guys, thank you so much for coming to Socialism Saturday. Again, if you were new, I hope you will come back next week. We do Socialism Saturday every Saturday at 6 p.m. You can dive into the archives if you're really wanting more socialism in the meantime. I know you guys are really kind of like there are some new people that are really excited about it. How many of you guys actually read the theory? I was socialist briefly and never read any theory. I will say that what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to just watch their training, watch their conference sessions, watch their classroom sessions, and I'm trying to ascertain what they believe without reading the academic theory. So mostly because I think James Lindsay has that covered. And how I want to approach this problem is, how does the woke left, and the socialists are one of the key manifestations of the woke left. The socialists are the tip of the spear in terms of the woke left. How does, when I started this 3 years ago, I was like, how does the woke left manifest in the real world? What are they doing in their trainings? What are they doing in the classroom? What are they doing in the diversity training? How are they teaching each other? Things like that. And that over the course of time evolved to socialism, because that's where this is all coming from. And so I prefer to come to my conclusions based entirely on what they are doing in the real world. And there's just so much content that it's like impossible to get through it all. And I think that James Lindsay's got it pretty covered from the academic perspective. So I tend not to read the academic stuff. I do every once in a while, but I tend not to. All right, guys, that's all we have for today. Please do mount that like button on the way out the door. If you are a paying member on the Substacks, you will be getting a newsletter tomorrow that it's going to invite you to the supporter Discord. Of course, we're doing movie night. We do movie nights every Sunday in the supporter Discord. I know I need to look at Tick history. People have told me this. I don't watch other people's content for the most part, but I promise at some point I'll look at Tick history. I promise. We're doing movie night tomorrow night in the supporter Discord at 8 p.m. I normally don't stream on Sundays. I take a day off. I've got some interviews tomorrow. That's going to be pretty great. I will be back streaming on Monday at 5 p.m. Guys, take care. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you.